Spiral Knight's setting had proven to be able to captivate years after its initial appearance. In this video, we want to identify the methodology the setting of Spiral Knights utilizes to create a sense of narrative depth of this fictional universe. What is the quality of this setting which provides it its power and ability to captivate, even to this day? For this, we will approach the way Cradle was established and expanded throughout players' progression as the central setting explored in game. Warning: this video will contain spoilers for two other works of fiction, Blaine and Made in Abyss. We will use them as references for mapping out Spiral Knight's setting with its motifs. It is the Abyss of Made in Abyss which will provide us value when applied to variety of Cradle. This comparison and thematic oscillation between a contrasting, marginally different environments will be explored within Cradle and then compared against aforementioned settings of the Abyss. Cradle is presented through Spiral Order perspective as the greatest wonder they and interstellar civilization had witnessed, an engineering feat of a different civilization, Gremlins, willing to go to such extent in order to achieve their own goals, path to which is marked by existence and totality of clockwork. In addition to challenging Isoran worldview and understanding of their universe's laws, Cradle's position becomes a tangible and physical extreme, which challenges Isorans in their own abilities. We will elaborate on it soon. Cradle inherently tests the limits of what fictional universe of Spiral Knights has the potential to offer by tapping into its many properties as a set of laws utilized by the megastructure, its motifs and appearances. Those are explored in many different contexts, among which are the limits themselves of the following system: a system of magic, like physical laws, used both as an arcane craft and as foundation for a magitech technology of gremlin and alchemy of Spiral Order. A system of souls traversing through multiple realms while also being manipulated or captured, a degree, intensity, and variety of manifestations of the laws governing this universe, such as presence of curses and excess of energy, a vague pantheon of eldritch gods, their conflicts and their capacity to be physically present within the setting directly in Cradle. With those states of Cradle metaphysics, Cradle becomes an artificial symbol of world tree, axis mundi, with an established cosmology by connecting most of present realms, while being framed itself as unique to Isoran worldview. Despite Cradle's semi-artificial origin, it still incorporates divine, chaotic, and celestial properties into its nature, manifested through effects of energy onto the environment and rest of the forces and factions permeating Cradle, from underworld to Apocryphal realm to past civilization. Presentation of Cradle through Isoran perspective is the initial step to positioning it as cosmically unique. The next step, one where the work of settings establishment and characterization is performed, is achieved by exploration of Cradle through its contrasting environments, while preserving the framing of a universe uniqueness to them. This motif of exploration is also found in distinguished appearances of the layers of the Abyss of Made in Abyss, and their individual locations the narrative focuses on by following the Hello Abyss team of Delver. Such locations remain distinct when separated from the contexts and settings of the Abyss and Cradle, but within those contexts present, they are galvanized by their confinement and proximity to each other within a larger, more mysterious system and power responsible for such arrangement. We will keep this notion of confinement as we introduce the similarities between the Abyss and Clockworks. The resulting feedback loop allows for a perpetual sense of exploration of respective setting, be it layers of the Abyss or confined to Cradle regions such as Gloaming Wildwood. Scarlet Fortress Almir, or variations of Sky Islands, among which one can choose to be invested into their individual locations' existence and history. This step of implicit characterization we propose reveals the other network of relations between the components comprising the foundations of Spiral Knights, both as a game, a medium, and Knight's narrative and perspective through which this universe and setting are experienced. A self-sufficient universe existing past its cultural influences and inspirations before, after, and beyond the game as its frame. There is a distinct dichotomy between protagonist Knight's perception of clockworks of the player and an in-universe perception of clockworks by its inhabitants. This difference is most distinct in the nature of the game as a medium, its art, music, etc. All of those presentations and modalities create a distinct feel and mental image of the environment, the experience of the game. Being an enjoyable activity of traversing clockworks exists separately from universe inhabitants' experience of it due to out-of-universe circumstances, being a fictional universe confined to a game required to be played. On the other side, there are the in-universe experiences and recounts of those experiences observed in the notes left by the Alpha Squad or any character at that matter. This perspective is also found in the intro cinematic, which showcases the presence of Izoran civilization, of their culture and customs. Then the rest of Cradle Beyond, Izoran perspective and occupation affects Izorans in their presentation in-game, as they are adapting to a new environment with both old and new tools at hand. Within this mutual influence, players' perspectives is inherently tied to the Izoran Knight, due to them being in the same position of being an outsider to Cradle and its ecosystems, and a proxy of players' perspective and agency. Through this framing, players' experience of Cradle coincides with Izoran's process of exploration and mastering of it throughout ranked missions or traversion of the arcade. Yet, there is a difference in perception of Cradle and Clockworks as they are presented through medium of the game, and what they are as an experience for Izorans in universe. Specifically, the perspective presented by all members of the Alpha Squad as, by contrast, more emotionally rich, expressive, and distinct than game's visual design language makes it appear. A recording from Euclid, Alpha Squad Leader. As Spiral Q is not yet fully operational and most systems are offline, these personal recordings will have to suffice as a record of our expedition until AQ can establish an uplink system with squads in the field. The clockworks are both fascinating and horrifying. Within a seemingly impossible machine, all manners of alien worlds exist within the giant globes that endlessly churn through every floor. What purpose do they serve? And from where did these worlds come? Before the crash, the Skylark performed a partial scan of Cradle's surface that revealed what appeared to be a landscape composed of enormous patches of disparate terrain. The clockworks are a manufactured place. Perhaps the worlds they contain are harvested from the terrain above. But how? A recording from Parma, Alpha Squad Recon. Someone out there has it in for me. While in Recon training, I was routinely frustrated by the limits of the training simulations. I knew they were not real. I craved the open air, soil beneath my feet, and the wind. I wanted the challenge only the wild can offer. The Skylark crash was horrible, and the resulting situation even worse. But when Captain Oslo selected me for this squad, I was excited. There is no greater wild than what this planet offered. Is that wrong? But then, as we stepped off of that first elevator platform and sunlight warmed our faces, it began to sink in. The grinding of gears, the buzzing of enormous lights, the smell of smoke, and the steam-filled air. The wild we had stepped into was not real. It was another simulation. More ironic still is how little of my training actually applies now. This world is crazy. The terrain changes constantly. I think this squad would have been better off with another Guardian instead of me. At least, they would be better prepared to fight whatever they didn't see coming. A recording from Rulin, Alpha Squad Technician. We narrowly evaded a gremlin trap today. Ambushed on a platform above a pit of molten slag, had to hold our ground against a horde of the snarling beasts as we dodged incoming rocket fire from above. Fun stuff. Grants took the full blast of a rocket twice, reacting only with a stagger as if he had discovered a stone in his boot. Sometimes I think that beneath his iron suit is a body of equally heavy iron. It would surprise me. Parma has been hard on herself, saying that she should have scouted the trap. But how can you scout a world that is ever in flux? This is a world designed to confuse its travelers. He wants to trap and destroy them. I'm starting to think it's like a cat toying with its prey before delivering the final blow. I hate cats. A recording from Euclid, Alpha Squad Leader. Within the clockworks, we can afford little sleep. Hostels are around every corner, and many of the environments are unsuitable for camp. But when sleep comes, I find myself dreaming more than I ever had before. In my dreams, I see Cradle slowly turning and drifting through the stars. I see the patches of its varying terrain unfold, stretch across the stars like an enormous quilt. It is an oddly comforting dream to see a world unravel itself. But then I wake, and the chaos of the clockworks engulfs me once more. The groans of its ever-turning cogs and howls of the terrible beasts that call it home, echoing everywhere. I hope to return one day to the surface, to a sun, to a place where peace is more than a fleeting dream. A recording from Grant's Alpha Squad Guardian. We have seen so many worlds on this mission, but none such as this. This burning citadel is not some construction of gremlin design. This is a real place, some kind of shell of a former empire. There is great sorrow here, something unlike anything I have felt before. Legions of shambling dead have attacked us here, relentless in their defense of this place, their broken, burnt frames crumbling and rising once more, ready for another battle. And just as they refuse to fall, so does the burning ruin around them. It is almost as if this whole realm is trapped in a single moment from some forgotten time, never changing, never allowing itself to finally turn to ash. You can feel it in the smoldering air, an eternal will holding this place together, never allowing its inhabitants to rest. No creature deserves such a fate. It is beyond my understanding. I wish to leave this place soon. I only hope that our doing so will provide some peace to the souls that dwell here. There are other instances of such contrasting in-universe characterization of clockworks, but present acknowledgment of this distinction is what will propel us forwards beyond players' perspective. While this coverage is extremely short, it is intentional but required for us to present the very concise examples of this pattern. In time, we may or may not treat and showcase it with all the rigor. Currently, those discussion may be found only on the original analysis. In order to separate and distill Iceran perspectives, we are concerned with the setting of Cradle itself, past the framing from the perspective of Isorans and the player, while considering its effects as a filter or a lens, other side of which is the presence of Cradle without and before Isorans. The experience of Cradle can be parsed as three essentials: the regions, the megastructure, and his Isoran frame of view. First, it is a soft science fiction setting with utilitarian soft magic system, presented primarily through modernized alchemical motif. A soft science fiction setting is found in the phenomenon of clockworks and base concepts of technology, found both in relation to spiral order and gremlins interfacing, utilizing concepts of elements and shadow. Presence of other alien species without their context as a kingdom also is important, as it introduces a different life form, which deepens megastructure's perceived scale and richness of its ecosystem. Compare habitats of vulvas, slimes, and chromalisks, wherein each possesses their own arrangement of themes, reflected in the musical themes those regions present in game. This variety of the setting and its population makes it relatable enough while remaining fantastic, as incorporating both magic and science fiction. Extreme ends of both of those notions are found within Cradle as Owlite and Almerian civilizations, and Gremlins through their all-encompassing megastructure respectively, ending in a blend of those notions and transformation of battle sprites, as an extreme of those notions becoming indistinguishable from each other in their metaphysics. It is a utilitarian, soft magic system. Utility in this case is not inherently a flaw, as alchemy is performed on materials with tied to them symbolic and emotional value without negating it in the transmuted item. It becomes a system evoking Western and Eastern beliefs crystallized in respective interpretations of real-world alchemy, while Azoran alchemy implicitly, subtly inherits them through the richness of alchemy as a system. This richness manifests in alchemy being a tool, a mundane occurrence for Isorans, but also one naturally existing within their own civilization. This is the second contrast of two symbols, of magic and its systematization, where magic also, as alchemy, is perceived as volatile medium, being studied without one aspect overwhelming the other, as it may be with symbolism of futuristic megastructure. Herein this collision of traditional and industrial manifests, both in Isoran and Gremlin magitech, which includes the attempt of utilizing curses, as also part of that system as a natural phenomenon in the same pattern as Allites were exploring divinity and chaos. Cradle bears modernized alchemical motif. As an elaboration of the notions of Azoran alchemy, we will pin it due to its complexity. Most of equipment is obtained through recipes presented to alchemy stations with introduction of orbs of alchemy. This is the foundation for the magitech element. This gear is made not of purposed construction materials, as the prime aspect for recipe assembly, but combination of metaphysical, including spiritual or symbolic property. Those materials vary from more mundane to more magical and mythical. The spectrum they offer is the showcase of the limits magitech and spirituality are metaphysically integrated as constants into this reality, to the point of being reflected in such supernatural materials as sparks or wisps of forge, grim and primal. For example, Stormchaser is a spirit and a power source of megastructures, facilities, and weapons, including the wonder weapons like Romulus Twin, Blighted Bone, due to its strong association with plague and death, is used in construction of weapons, but also as a bone. It is used to assemble bone, base defenses, shields, and armor with focus on lingering spirits tethered to the bones, in the specifics becoming the anchor for them to be used as the origin of shadow damage of such equipment. Then there is Maiden's Tear. It is a sacred jewel whose unaffected by curse existence allows only through alchemy's ability to transcend time to bring back aspects of the original kingdom of Almer, despite it being a fallen, cursed kingdom in the present. The only other depictions of Almer before the curse, and without influence of alchemy, are observed either in spirit form, as Tauren, or by means of Spirit Mother, a different case of divine intervention, smaller scale, confined to Almerian narrative. This approach can be seen through all Almerian gear, which allows for, despite being a single arc across the Soren progression, to emotionally resonate. And it is due to its greater characterization, it attains those properties which are as much concealed for other narrative. This notion, as we can see, is particularly similar to characterization of specific arcs of Made in Abyss, rendering those locations as distinct milestones across protagonists' journey. Almir in prior case is not a single example, but one most distinguished, as in the same manner we can further explore Owlites and Cat Tribe, or the Jelly Kingdom, which in their own directions are in fact expanded, albeit without such focus on specific characters. Alchemy, within this interpretation, becomes a very efficient method of characterization, while conveying desired themes and moods the respective narratives are built with. The regions are wrapped into clockworks and an artificial planet, a megastructure containing fantasy lost kingdoms, sum total of which is Cradle itself. Cradle's cosmic uniqueness in every aspect is represented through a point of convergence of different genres, motifs, time periods, and metaphysics due to nature of contents, of the megastructure and its emergent role as world axis. Both this setting and alchemy as a magic or crafting system create a fusion of those elements, a purposed kitchen sink of narrative in the very beginning denoted as all-encompassing medievalism. This is achieved, we suggest, through a separation between the megastructure and the contained landmasses, where the latter is an opposite of what megastructures may represent, yet both are present nearby. This separation is distinct and is seen through the existence of gremlin machinery of clockwork tunnels and compounds, where a bridging quality is found through compounds coexisting with nature of sky domes, extending into the contained landmasses devoid in varying degree of clockwork's presence. Most importantly, the existence of those landmasses is acknowledged by the megastructure, as sky domes offer stationary anchors for their containment or provide infrastructure, such as elevators, doorways, and lighting. This is an intentional design choice and purpose of the megastructure, given Echostone's context, to fortify the planet through its transformation, which recontextualizes the megastructure as an originally benevolent creation of the concrete origin, rather than only one of usurpation in the present, reminiscent of the revelations found in the noise prior to Blame. Through this story, driven perspective and element of nuance is now attributed to this megastructure, and therefore its contents and inhabitants. On the other hand, megastructure can emerge originally as celebration and manifestation of humanity's abilities. But, as postmodern framing of megastructure demonstrates, such as Blame, this period of time is usually long overshadowed by image of the megastructure as embodiment of industrialization. This positive period of time can be identified through conceptualization of Gremlin as a civilization with a hypothetical history, but one inseparable from clockworks, found in particularly more advanced depictions of their technologies, found in the console, adjacent design. The character of the megastructure and what it has the potential to be framed into with other aspects of the setting becomes a symbol which can be recognized on a cultural level, granting the work it is set in a symbolic and emotional anchor to the same extent alchemy provides an efficient way to reflect principles of merging cosmology and of philosophy. Both notions become means of setting's characterization by interfacing with its narratives through physical exploration by the protagonist. Those two aspects of setting confined, the fantasy of regions of cradle and the megastructure itself, would not create a present impression and immersion without a third element, a pre-established genre, which would give the setting its distinct emotional weight, and by magnitudes more tangible and physical presence. The third essential is the way player experiences this universe through the game as their window. It is the very medium which provides pacing, soundtrack, and art style as means to leave a distinguished impression and create immersion. This element of framing is a tightly integrated machinery of narratives, characters, progression through the story, and pacing of the protagonist to which player's perspective is attached, filtered through a distinct vision the setting should appear in and through which parts of the setting will be introduced, revealed, and presented. It is the way both the setting and the megastructure are experienced through player's perspective, rolled into a medium through which player experiences the setting in the form of a game. To study this medium is to cover how game design explains this game, and for our purposes we will point out only a few elements which we suggest are important enough to be considered essential for the medium to leave present impression while keeping in mind the setting itself. At this point, places emerge, the medium of locations for the story, and the way it is paced and experienced while bearing an emotional weight. Both unconnected, diverse narratives from megastructure and settings designs evoke a bidirectional influence. Stories are mostly self-contained as they are confined to the regions, even when separated from the designs of the setting of a ranked mission progression. In this context, and given above prerequisites, Cradle becomes a gallery for region settings and a tool to explore their stories, each set in a different epoch, and then exploration of those regions grants greater narrative weight to the clockworks as the scaffolding, fortress, and confinement form. The setting of Cradle, when separated from prior stories, is positioned in a sliding scale, or a chart from classical to post-modern narratives, and then measured by their idealistic to cynical nature. Those relations are mapped out, relative to each other, but their sum total is what creates the character of the megastructure, its totality. In order to identify and measure those properties, we will rely on the architecture of the setting, its regions and the megastructure, through tropes such as steampunk to dieselpunk dynamics as the shorthand for those collections of ideas and beliefs those narratives tell as they exist within the characteristic design of clockworks. Aforementioned dieselpunk does not forbid steampunk elements, but serves as an umbrella term for specific areas of the setting. Steampunk, clockpunk, to dieselpunk, solarpunk, and cyberpunk punk, attributed genres of fiction function as a shorthand for translating the ideas and themes through environment. They possess several key assumptions about the setting they characterize, emergent from application of those ideas and concepts in a tangible form which grants them vision, character, and grit. But it depends on the author how they may choose to use those structures when applied to a concrete work of fiction, including the amount and quality of work directed at presenting ideas or favoring aesthetic. Clockwork scale its in-universe grind, its hostile in-universe nature to isorons, with presence of gremlins as denizens protecting the structure from intrusion frame. This environment has dieselpunk. Presence of factories, production plants, manufacturing facilities, and other service locations further frames it such due to observation of the assumed processes within the structure, rather than exploration of its fronts, that is, lives of those inhabiting this setting. By being explicitly mechanical, clock-like design becomes clockpunk, which does not extend beyond general application of gears and designs, but its in-universe unwelcoming aesthetic offsets it to the cynical end of the spectrum, which can be incorporated into dieselpunk as a genre. Other aspects, briefly mentioned in contrast to clockworks proper, are the contents of Skydome. They offer a change from factory-like environments while offsetting clockworks to a background element, becoming an undercurrent motif. Those locations, from deconstruction zones as our baseline of clockworks aesthetics within the Skydomes, to deviations from this direction, allow us to see the other side of the setting, its regions. The stories of those regions exist within a setting and physical confinement of the megastructure, allowing for specific themes to be recognized in a literally compact environment, each of which correspond to narratives of their stories, but also characterize a facet of the encompassing megastructure. We will rely on TV tropes as a shorthand to present those concepts. The cosmology, and death, as a symbol of death, with physicality and presence, is prevalent and common within the setting which is capable of organically accommodating it within the above-established system, from Weird West to futurism, on a scale of low-tech to high-tech, from fantasy to fantastic, in the systems of classical elements of water, fire, earth, and air. A fifth element is an iteration or variation on the concept of ether or primordial, void and alike, representative of a soul of all matter being a separate element. In case of Spiral Knights, this system remains two-layered, as there are systems of damage types and elements proper. Alchemy and other forms of magitech emerge from pre-established metaphysics as a common tool for production of goods, which extends from a different set of physical laws of varying complexity, allowing both for magic or occult symbolism to fit with its application by underworld and apocrypha. In this regard, sufficiently analyzed magic as a trope is applicable to isorons, gremlins, owlites, and devilites. Megastructure becomes the symbol for the extreme systematization and industrialization of a way to experience and utilize those physical laws. Tortomega and tortodrones. From more abstract principle within the cosmology, we approach Tortomega. While abandoning the entire system of evolution from dragons, we observe Tortomega as inseparable from their habitation, gloaming wildwoods and arrangement of floating islands. Move a world of gloaming wildwoods if tortodrones and ruins are considered. Otherwise it is wild wilderness. Tortodrones are the case of wakening the sleeping giant. Tortomega and tortodrones possess theme of coexisting with nature as fantastic nature titans and golems respectively. Forest nature of Tortomega is shifted in the form of titans, as bearers of shadow graviton technology, granting them a different character and appearance through introduction of equipment made of shadow steel. tortodrones possess means to be considered one of more dangerous weapons on Cradle, in some aspects surpassing gremlins, Romulus twins of modern age, comparable to mobile dreadnought. Tortodrones are created through power of mineral, a natural source of power. This concept reaches its failed state with application of dark matter, leading to physical corruption of a tortodrone, while accenting subjugation of life narrative for Undercore through effects, dark matter, and shadow introduced to material realm. Underworld and Undercore. City of the damned of Dark City. A Vice City, if not Devilite's presence. Due to presence of dark matter, can be considered Graffiti Town. Occultism becomes representative of an underworldly hellish nature. Undercorp, as a corporation, in pursuit of strategic usurpation of material realm, a realm of nature, produces anti-human narrative, a certain trope. Undercorp, as Underworld, was developing from initially classic occult aesthetics to one of Magitech with occult-like themes only within its designs, presenting a case of their technology evolving alongside other civilizations, while still emerging as a method to present physical law. This evolution is reflected in the aforementioned creation of Tortodrone, Valkyries, and Owlites. Through Valkyries, their celestiality and divinity, they are represented as notions from the past, heavily obfuscated by time and through deterioration of all castles of Cradle. Dark fantasy of Candlestick Keep and grave-clouded graveyards exist as extensions of this notion of obfuscation. This very obfuscated state reveals the prime conduits for other side of the spectrum in universe magic is treated as proper magic with inexplicable potential and subversion. Dungeon Punk emerges from a preserved ability to recognize those structures as more fantasy inspired in juxtaposition to the megastructure. Heaven and Stranger. The initial state and the quote hometown unquote. The player is presented after the tutorial are the trope of Ghibli Hills, of Haven with strangers, planet's surface in general. Strangers' celebrations show extreme attunement with the nature of Cradle as the symbolic world axis, both in relation to the undeath and celestiality, but devoid of divinity due to its concealed state through Core's lockdown. Their mining operations and the connection of Haven to the megastructure further expands on this relation as one of economy and practicality in addition to spirituality. Strangers themselves remain concealed while showcasing complexity of their culture, which grants them depth of character without need of elaborate analysis, making them more so believable. Izorans and Spiral Order. Equipment, designs in their bulk and proportional to Isoran's scale, reminiscent of the technology within, made in Abyss universe, with addition of technological advancement. Mimicry of other civilizations and incorporation of their cultures, though alchemy, as it is presented earlier, alchemy is utilized as a tool. Alchemy allows to pull items from different epochs from Cradle's past through acquisition of recipes and association and incorporation of thematically embodying materials into an object. In order for alchemy to work, orbs of alchemy function as the catalyst for the transmutation. Morai wars and relation to energy create through the framing and perspective of the game a balance between a distinct goal of compromising the realm of Cradle in order to harvest its energy and becoming its guardians by the end of the campaign. Kingdom of Almire. Kingdom of Almire is a merge of multiple dramatic Fallen Kingdom-esque tropes, designs, and customs through presence of themes of organic attunement with nature. Praising recounts of this Almire in conjunction with benevolent presence of spirit mother create an infallible image of a myth-veiled kingdom. This image is then further deepened by appearances of restored Almirian architecture reflecting the supernatural attunement which allows for greater degree of mythologization of that very distant image of a kingdom by the fact of great difference in appearance from present fallen Almire. King in the Mountain trope being the means of Almire's fall, rather than salvation, is the driving factor which grants this narrative an emotional depth through transformation of the kingdom into its opposite, a state resembling Undercorp in its poisonous to natural order existence with consideration of undeath as a phenomenon, but possessing no aggressive intent, instead being replaced with grief. This grief, due to its supernatural origin, exists even in undeath, it has no simple methods of resolution, leaving the only option an intervention of a third party. Iserons. The contrast between those two states and a simple but treacherous path from one to another is the reason for the investment into this narrative. Cat tribe. Cats, divine species, are transformed into undead which bear same curse which they brought into existence and to their own downfall. Cat tribe, separate faction of divine cats, possesses extensive knowledge of shadow damage through bearing its evil eye on their equipment, despite which they were overtaken by the cataclysm, rendering them as beings of underworld or undeath in general. This position of cats is underpinned by a common habitat of heavenly kingdom of Allites and Valkyries, which reframes cat tribe, contrary to cats, proper citizens of the kingdom, now as the rogue group opposed to the principles of divinity by affiliation with symbolism of the evil eye. Apocrypha and eldritch gods. Reality as malleable medium which can be bent. This paradigm is exclusive to eldritch gods, Apocrypha in particular. In lesser manner, to the swarm through removal of observed certainty of the gates in universe by introducing unknown passage as a change from standard route, is reminiscent of the obsidian nexus and the shrouded plateau. Aprian realm is also manifested in Haven's town square. Presence of eldritch gods is presence of concealed final states of the world, the way the world must be shaped. Swarm, eldritch abomination, desires consumption. Sleeper, as a benevolent deity, desires a return to a balance across the celestial hierarchy of realm. Apocrypha, as an avatar of negation, works towards retraction of existing complexity of the world. Cosmic mechanics of souls contribute to yet to be seen concept of an eldritch device capable of negating existence. As souls, being consciousnesses, still function as fuel and source of energy. Eldritch deities are presented as unknowable in the universe, while their motivations can be in reality deduced. Appearances of eldritch deities rely on the presentation through abstract or basic shapes, cubes, spheres, or square. Simplicity of the shape they appear through makes them more alienating from designs of material realm, like the souls or the swarm avatar. Once regions are established in their contrast to each other in the clockworks, they are meant to connect with the megastructure in a physical form which is representative of the megastructure and its architecture. Otherwise, the sense, a suspension of disbelief, of a confined presence of such varying environments would be eroded by lack of physical transition. In our case, this transition is firmly established through elevators being always present at the start and the end of every depth and found in the elevator route of the arcade gates or other mission. Furthermore, rank missions allow for a possibility of more descriptive means of establishing those regions' presences, such cases being Firestorm Citadel, Bile Engine, or Royal Jelly Palace, or it may be depths names within distinct rank missions providing textual description to those places. The transition in some cases may be restricted only to an elevator, such case being Gloaming Wildwoods, but some instances allow for megastructure's presence to establish itself within those unique environments. Those examples allow for far more extensive characterization of clockworks in all aspects, from its architecture, its patterns of integration into various environments, and the resulting from bidirectional influence of one onto another environment which now carries both industrial and urban designs of clockworks and natural environments of what it integrates with. The first and more widespread example are the compounds, as they are present within sky domes, and are built across suspended land masses, without eroding the latter. Compounds may be subverted in their incorporation with the environment. Such instances vary from Compound 42 and its environmental hazards, lumbering operations across Jigsaw Valley, to Haven, as a town built and integrated with the megastructure's surface and rock. In the same notion, other regions can be explored further by identifying the way alterations to them are made in conjunction with the transitions into the surrounding megastructure. Gloaming Wildwood. The woods, as well as occasional caverns, present a case of clockworks not being present across entirety of planet's volume, allowing for some areas to remain as if they were unaffected by the presence of the megastructure apart from, as much as other regions, be vertically arranged through elevators. Wildwoods are the homeland of Tortomega, centering them around themes of earth and nature, with later addition of mineral. It is also a location which was a place of shadow damage warfare through introduction of cursed miasma, and grim gates as points of underworld mobilization. This contrast of nature and shadow over a mineral allows for tortodrones as artificial constructs bearing both of those properties in all their complexity to exist. Presence of megastructure is felt through re-emergence of divi-lit presence as grim gates appear across clockworks. Scarlet Fortress is a castle which exists despite lack of its inhabitant. Yet, compared to explicitly haunted state of Owlite Academy, the fortress remains practically untouched as a semi-safe maze-like location with specific pacing while Izoran research takes place across it, such being the eternal study. Despite its size, clockworks can still be distinctly seen in the background, but they are not as integrated into the fortress, similar to Almire and the Academy also by the fact of being uncontained within a sky dome. It is a case of a kingdom floating freely across clockworks, which allows us to group it with the other fallen kingdom, Almire, its necropolis, graveyards, and cavern with the citadel itself, and Owlites, to whom we have attributed the castle. The character of its associated names, coupled with generally preserved, undeterred, royal aesthetics, makes it a unique location to visit. Most importantly, as we pointed out, aspect of royalty, the other component makes its impression most distinct while solidifying it through contrast with the complexity of industrial nature of clockworks. The fortress is lit, yet its builders are absent. It is left untouched by time, even more explicitly than any other location with the capacity to appear deteriorating. Scarlet Fortress had remained unchanged since disappearance of its owners, and its scale, comparable to a megastructure, despite the continuously rearranged nature of the latter, remains as a preserved image of a bygone era. With consideration of the timeline, case of Scarlet Fortress presents the implicit power of the Clockworks technology through the ability to loosely contain the fortress within the clockwork. Royal Jelly Palace. As Scarlet Fortress, this castle of a precursor civilization is overtaken by an alien life form which was spreading across the megastructure and by that time was utilized in the operation of the megastructure itself by its builder. The palace may have come from the same mass of a floating castle, Scarlet Fortress, and yet it is separated from it. The alien life form, as the royal jelly and the precursor civilizations, both have a monarchy which had made the castle not to be stripped of its symbolic role, but preserving it under an occupation of alien life form, as the palace for royal jelly. Within the confinements of clockworks and under a rule of alien civilization, this palace now exists throughout Jelly Kingdom's history in the form of royal jellies and ice queens present. If fiendish involvement is to be considered for Ice Queen's plot, then this story vaguely parallels Maulus's overtake of Amu Sol. Megastructure reveals itself as mechanical additions to the palace, which now we know is supposed to appear identical to Scarlet Fortress. Modern technology is being added to the original designs. Service pipes, searchlights, and other utilities, culminating at the console behind the throne room. The console, as extension of the megastructure, adds the new layer to its designs through distinctly different appearance of the console, which furthermore contrasts the medievalistic design of the castle. The same phenomenon can be observed for the Firestorm Citadel, which, in relation to its plot, was never framed during its introduction as an important to Clockworks operation location. Firestorm Citadel has a less explored design as it belongs to a different culture. It is a cursed fortress and center of a fallen kingdom. It, as much as Scarlet Fortress, floats across the volume of the megastructure. The citadel is surrounded by remnants of owl-light civilization while attracting fire-themed monsters across the megastructure due to its cursed existence. The citadel exists in a stasis similar to the Scarlet Fortress, but While for Scarlet Fortress, this stasis is of its conflict appearing to be gone, Firestorm Citadel exists through particularly grim combination of grief perpetuated by supernaturality of curse, therefore offering no reconciliation for it. Almir's narrative appears more believable due to presence of concrete characters, with their own perspectives found across various missions. As the curse holds the Citadel through its master, the Citadel characterizes nature of curse through curse's manifestation. Those aspects are further amplified by introducing Darkfire Firestorm Citadel. Contrary to bygone or in part reconciled nature of the Allied Kingdom, even when events regarding Black Cats are considered, Firestorm Citadel continues to exist in perpetual conflict, where this conflict is the very obstacle both for Izorans and Gremlin. This conflict allows for a much smaller degree of clockworks to be present, being the elevators and the console at the very end. But in return, this very property of Firestorm Citadel as a fortress allows it to be utilized by the megastructure for a single function of securing the console, despite the source of this protection being far darker in its tone. As noted earlier, this very notion allows for elevation and deepening of the relation between the megastructure and integrated regions in respect to specifics of each region. A distinct motif, we believe, is observed here, one emergent from an artificially expunged from time existence of multiple regions, as the technologies of past and future are being merged and refined, now with a common foundation of an authority commanding their use specifically, monarchies with gremlin suit clockworks being in the position of greatest power over entirety of Cradle. In emergence of video games characterized by megastructures, we are presented an array of settings to which Spiral Knights can now be compared against. Through this evaluation, we can identify Cradle's second essential, the Clockworks Cradle megastructure. Megastructure is the very foundation of the setting outside of Isoran perspective. While may be considered secondary, here it will be explored in conjunction with character of Gremlins, eventually transitioning into their analysis. Here we consider Cradle inseparable from the megastructure of Clockworks due to the narrative and technical framing of both as a single mechanism, Cradle as a fortress. From the perspective of the Knight's progression through rank missions, the megastructure exists in the background as the glue to connect multiple settings. The region, it is experienced as through story arcs and their corresponding locations, such as the arc of preparations to infiltrate Firestorm Citadel, Royal Jelly Palace, or Ironclaw Munitions Factory. While all those plots are elements of the ultimate goal of reaching the core and tracking the Alpha Squad, Clockworks don't get exceptional focus by the characters, accepted as a matter of fact, on top of which the regions are seen as more so peculiar. On the contrary, it is when locations essential to the megastructure are encountered, it briefly regains its relevancy and interest of characters revolving around the consoles, the core, Gremlins, and the Swarm, all of which regain relevancy once all the obstacles to the core are passed through. In order to properly discuss the megastructure, we should start from Clockwork's identity devoid of its region. 1. Soren narrative is driven by a need for energy. The megastructure, on the contrary, contains limitless energy, affirming its unique cosmic and metaphysical position, established early on though the statements and samples of its influence, such as transformation of battle sprite. 2. The megastructure is maintained by a civilization of builders, whose image is initially reminiscent of fantasy goblins with an accent on militarism, subterranean habitation within the megastructure, and semi-hazard nature of their habitation. 3. Megastructure presents dieselpunk of deconstruction zones, steampunk of the sky domes, and the sci-fi aesthetic of clockwork pillars. Science fiction manifests fully through more advanced gremlin design, transitioning into, if not occult, but magic-powered solution. Clockwork's facilities are powered by supernatural essences. It is a magic-powered technology, hence being called Magitech, also explored through alchemy of Isoran. 4. The Eldritch, or cosmic horror narrative, is instrumental to the nature of the limitless energy. It manifests in megastructure's slow decline, and a trope of leaking can of evil due to swarms semi-sealed present. Coincidentally, this megastructure contains civilizations being long gone and before this left in a state of crisis, including into this pattern gremlins themselves, with a drawn-out end in the form of iron law enforcement, and swarms' eventual ascent from the core adjacent depths. This directly leads to the next point. 5. Tone shift is not a part of the subjective Isoran narrative and the progression through the megastructure, but an essential part of the megastructure. From the surface to the core is a case of ascended fridge horror. Given Swarm's nature as man-made eldritch being, it is also a case of Cerebus syndrome across rank mission. 6. Regular clockworks appear peaceful and operational as intended, which contrasts the abnormal state of those locations when interjected by the swarm, further contributing to the cosmic horror. 7. This peaceful and operational state of clockworks attains same qualities on its own scale in the form of the core, as working as intended, parallel to its deific nature. 8. The core and its terminal, specifically at core's sealed state, and devoid of players' experience of the swarm bear motif of incomprehensible engine. This initial character of the core as a place is established both through its appearances and Isoran narrations, framing it as the heart. We include the core into the character of the megastructure due to the same notion of a tone shift, essential to the setting, and the fact that it is the last location across any arcade or shadow layers run. Red, ominous clouds of the horizon over the core as part of core's design further emphasizes its cyclopean nature, even compared to the rest of Clockworks up above, which, at that point, are more understood and even mastered. This allows the core to be a gateway to the residing within Clockworks and Gremlins' ongoing conflict as a rite of passage to the actual state of affairs. Those tropes will be kept in mind as we explore the way setting was initially presented in the tutorial and throughout rank mission. Alpha Squad identifies Clockworks as a trap of shifting architecture and passages which allows now for megastructure to become a character on itself. While not explicitly antagonistic, it is always present in the background and possesses hazardous nature through its environments and inhabitants. Taking current and pre-existing landscape of brutalist architecture, driven works of, in comparison, more idealistic and optimistic view of megastructures as pinnacle of engineering, we consider the rippling effects of blame on the perception of megastructures being important to this narrative. We have covered this aspect of an universe background and enveloping nature of Clockworks, and here we can make a suggestion that this property had emerged from this interpretation of a future similar to one presented in Blame. If we're to go further with drawing parallels between motifs Blame and Clockworks directly possess, we would point out a few elements. 1. Of the swarm to the silicon life outside of Netsphere, while both have no access to the corresponding locations in full extent. Then, it is the Netsphere itself which, unreachable, separate from the physical reality of the megastructure, is most reminiscent of the core as permanently sealed and containing both technologically advanced and divine reality distinct from the material realm. 3. With consideration of Blame, prequel noise, as Silicon Life had emerged from occults, so the swarm had emerged from actions of a third party, being Underworld, intersecting with the operation of Clockworks at their earlier period, resulting in a state of lasting conflict. 4. The original purpose of Clockworks and the core was benevolent for the builders as much as Blame. City was in the events of Noi. In case of Spiral Knights, this earlier period of time is characterized by the console's distinct design, themes and technology of greater unity and design language shared with the core. 5. As the first-class exterminator manifested in plain space, it has created a structure from within appearing as a rectangular room. The notion of matter manifestation in this simpler form is reminiscent of the patterns of matter manifestation by the core most observable at the unknown passage. In both cases, the origin of this power is essential to respective megastructure. Apart from those similarities, we should stress the importance of the console's symbolism for gremlins as being the harbingers of greater in scope narrative and characters, which was not explored up until the core was reached. The consoles, as they connect to operation of the core and serve the milestones in Knight's campaign, eventually connect to the purpose and design of Clockworks as a whole, while making relevant the conception of Cradle and the direction Gremlins it universally had chosen to lead it to. This narrative becomes more distinct through establishment of Cradle as a mythological location with presence of the divine, which we compared to a world tree through connection of multiple realms within itself. Divine realms through wrapping into white space within the core. White space and the core provide interfaces of matter transition from material realm to supernatural ones through systemic application of technology. Nether realms, underworld, blinding abyss, Apocryphal realm. The underworld, in the context of a world tree, is viewed as a natural part of Soul's life cycle. It is not inherently malevolent. Yet, in case of Cradle, the underworld is one at the periphery of seizing material realm through Cradle's metaphysical state by recognizing the symbolism and reoccurring design patterns of underworld totems. The void found in physiology of the swarm as this universe's symbolic, alchemical first matter is also accessed on terms of beings which exist beyond material realm. This places the void as valuable and malleable a source which conventionally is not accessible by inhabitants of material realm, reserving it to be a shorthand to the divine and celestial for one accessing it. As Cradle may be viewed through this symbolic lens, the antagonistic force, being the swarm or underworld, appear as complex as Cradle's environments and richness of their symbolism. One of the major elements associated with the underworld is the curse and eye symbolism. Its wide presence across separate locations and time periods serves as a mark of whether Underworld's direct or indirect involvement, which allows us to further characterize the latter through Curse's context across the regions and their plot. Undercorp is not addressed directly to the same extent. Swarm was not acknowledged up to most direct confrontation. And as Undercorp is not explored to the same depth, and it is not distinctly observed properly, this indirectly frames him as a faction not intended to be discovered in the same manner the Swarm was concealed in the depths of Megastructure before its proper reveal. The Swarm in that regard has a context of urgency for its arc because the actions taken towards reaching the core are tied to nature and goals of the Swarm. The Swarm requires in that regard more elaboration as a case study of those unknown elements. Operation across Cradle. While we intend to separate eldritch horrors of the megastructure from the distinct actors and factions, we should also note on permanent presence of Undercore and Underworld, alongside Gremlins noted earlier though constant presence of Nether-like forces. Part of Cradle's environment is infused with supernatural forces, specifically undeath, wherein it is more present than supernatural phenomena, which would be considered divine in nature. In the present, as we discussed regions, portions of megastructure are found in association with Underworld. Through non-hostile appearances of Moorcroft Manor and more expansive haunted passages of clockwork tunnels, being a case of a pattern of undeath-themed levels, tunnels, arenas and so on being part of a standard roster of level rotation. This allowed us to propose a declining state of Cradle as a megastructure. Addition of other antagonistic and existential threats, Apocrypha and Swarm, resulted in proposition of Cradle being compromised furthermore. This interpretation of the relation of the megastructure with the underworld, when consolidated, resulted in the following sequence. Functional foundation of Magitech, essential principle of energy and its carriers, specifically mineral. Entirety of the narrative exists on the universally unmatched abundance of energy within Clockworks, a phenomenon which sets the precedent, and one to be the goal of the Izora narrative. This foundation remains exposed as it is present in every aspect of the megastructure, from mundane to extreme, in prior case being used by other settled civilization. The goal of protecting a deity from an eldritch horror in an eternal black and white morality battle for existence. physical foundation, and raw resource is a planet with the history of subverted underworld, sieging the planet due to its connection with energy and divine, in the past protected by a different civilization of semi-celestial guardians. Each iteration of guardian civilization falls to the same proxy threat which conceals the true eldritch existential threat. Remnants of those kingdoms exist eternally, are contained and repurposed in the final kingdom of the megastructure builders, who are meant to fall by the same principle as the prior kingdoms observed in real time of game's event. The functional magic technologies start to incorporate profane designs from a proxy threat once the megastructures is deeply compromised. Complexity of the megastructure's power source, a man-made eldritch god-like being emerges which reflects that complexity and becomes a significant threat as much as the original existential threat. Here we refer to our discussion of Underworld throughout the timeline, as their presence on Cradle, without prior analysis, would not result in establishment of their distinct motivation, nor identification of a pattern. But with addition of other civilizations from across the timeline, we can formulate a narrative which can resonate through observation of its iteration of it in the present. In the same extent, clockworks were incorporated into the enclosed regions and distinct location. So presence of Undercore through their technology was seeping into respective civilizations targeted by Underworld. By acknowledging this small element of the repeated pattern of Underworld's intervention, this notion can be seen as both unconventional and aesthetically appealing through harmonic designs of Underworld and of civilizations of material realm. Shadow damage and curse become characteristic additions to an already complex design in the similar manner as we have explored the Swarm and its relation to patterns of curse. Cats. Found through cat tribe. Supposedly divine cats wear armor reminiscent of Valkyrian designs, yet with antique evil eye engraved onto its plate. In Undeath, cats become unrecognizably more monstrous, such being Grimalkin are generally animalistic, as in case of the rest of Black Cat. In this direction, Margot represents one of two most infused with curse beings, the other being Lord Banadu. Tortomega and tortodrones. While covered extensively, tortodrones possess nature-themed designs, and the act of their disassembly and integration with dark matter presents their change both in character and perception, an act of fantastical corruption. For Tortomega, through shadow steel designs we can compare them to cats of cat tribe, with addition of specific to Tortomega association with Undercorp's graviton technology. Soros. Throughout the campaign night unlocks recipes which retain general appearance of non-shadow damage variants, yet the distinct theme of shadow damage is reflected in the different purpose of those weapons. Phantomos and Umbra Driver preserve purple color with minimal difference from their variant. Tundras, Permafroster, and Biohazard attain different design, one of ice covering the handgun or presented as poisonous. Grim Repeater is more distinguished in its appearance, fitting to the urban setting of Dark City. Sentenza incorporates more gothic designs into its decorative elements, Barrel in particular. Dark Matter Bomb in first tiers, it shares runic and mineral design with Tortodrone. Gremlins, as titans and cats, also possess shadow technology in the advent of their fall. It is manifested through their direct application of shadow damage and their designs. From more subtle, such as appearances of a single eye as part of the design of constructs and equipment, to far more distinct, such appearance of drawn eye in the collector. There is also Gremlin Elite, which wields shadow technology, examples of which being Cirrus, Cradle Defenses, Collector, and in a different direction, hazardous elemental designs of Red Romulus Twin. Megastructures by their nature are larger than life creations built for a purpose which lasts as long as the construction goes and far beyond. Then, there is a great chance of this purpose being lost in the act of megastructure's construction, or being left in the past, when megastructure is large and self-sufficient enough to exist beyond matter of time. This exact property of uncontrolled, potentially chaotic and suspended existence had allowed such settings to incorporate cosmic or eldritch horror into the narrative, as both exist in a plane which surpasses individuals' existence. Among instances of eldritch horrors within megastructures, it is also common to see the horror to be man-made, emerging from the complexities of the megastructure as microcosm of reality. In case of Cradle, we can consider more mundane undercore, but it is an invader outside of the cradle. Then there is Apocryphal realm, which has similar to underworld themes, apart from Apocryph's goal to annihilate reality as a cosmic force of negation. Last, there is the Swarm. As discussed earlier, the Swarm is another well-defined instance of eldritch horror, but one inherently tied to Clockwork's history. The Swarm, through its framing, exists through a principle shared with the other instances of this trope, of a man-made creation within the man-made megastructure, created by past mistakes of the builder. It is the nature and components which allow this eldritch entity to exist in the first place, the mystery of its origin being one of its defining factor. Those components are either not intended to be discovered or require a thorough investigation to be performed on the medium in order to uncover it, leading this mystery to be one of the latest in the setting to be revealed. The totality of those concealed components allows for alien design of the Swarm, or any eldritch entity in that narrative, to exist and to be remembered indefinitely, as long as the mystery persists. And then, this entity reinstates itself as the essential element of megastructure's story. This pattern can be traced back to the mentioned earlier trope of a sealed evil in a can, which does not diminish the Swarm nor the proposed trope, but further their respective power and storytelling potential as valid narrative. Horror exists at the bottom of the megastructure, presents a case of an ailment of the body, emergent from its complexity. The cosmic scale and incomprehensibility of the megastructure, in order for the horror to be of substantial damage, requires same degree of terror. Such actor must breach any established systems within the megastructure. This narrative can be reinterpreted and subverted as a trope. Initially, we would connect instance of eldritch horror tied to water to the elder gods of Lovecraft's Yog. Sothilry, which is one way to look at them, but apart from this interpretation, both the Swarm and in lesser manner Apocrypha can exist completely on their own, without prior knowledge of the inspirations which we suggested to exist. As we're discussing the eldritch nature of Sleeper, Apocrypha, and the Swarm, it is only the latter we believe is depicted most clearly as entity meant to evoke most unease. And here we will explain why we believe it to be so based solely on the presented narrative. Swarm is introduced properly for the first time during it came from the low-rank mission, specifically into the Maw Depths arena. It is one of more difficult and more unexpected instances of an encounter if mission's gate map is to be ignored, as it introduces enemy types going against the established elevator icon system. While the duration of the onslaught is particularly long, in that very moment Swarm's name was justified by invoking a sense of far greater threat as it was revealing its threat. And of course, as this arena is followed by the unknown passage, this mission firmly sets, if not the stakes, but the level of danger Swarm represents, and the true danger Clockworks conceal once all other obstacles to the core will pass through. This idea is reintroduced in the unknown passage, specifically in its level design, as the Swarm does not stop as the knight traverses the arenas at the beginning and the end of the passage. The intensity of Swarm's presence increases past the knight through appearance of additional turrets, warm sources, and greater screen obfuscation. As most of enemy categories are present for Swarm-themed arenas, this capacity of mimicry or corruption of each of those species elevates the Swarm as far more fundamental in its influence and therefore nature. Those elements, if paired with the eldritch nature of the Swarm, we propose, invoke or at least allow for cosmic horror to be felt through the presence of the Swarm, whose power is one which so much surpasses everything encountered prior. Notably, it is here Apocria is framed lesser of a danger due to Knight's capacity to escape it by traversing the plateau and reaching the departure. Apocria's distant presence, by being hidden in a different dimension and danger, are further weakened by the capacity to reach an end, despite a somber as evident by framing of the departure, resolution of the previous Izuron expedition. As for the Swarm, there is no end present in the campaign. Aspect of Swarm scale, as insurmountable but concealed within deepest clockworks, makes it more potent and present than Apocria. The Swarm can be seen in the unknown passage, which contributes to the feeling of cosmic horror, as that depth offers a different set of symbols which deepen Swarm's image even when refuge or sanctuary as environments are considered. Lastly, there is the Swarm and Apocria as two distinct antagonistic and classical sense forces. Apocria is framed as a deity with identity and motivation, achieved through complex manipulation. It attempts to negate a reality as a goal, to which it may bring the living being. It uses souls and has high possibility of using them to exist. The Swarm, on the other hand, is not a natural entity in cosmogonic sense. It is an artificial creation. The Swarm only exists to expand, and because of its simple but relentless existence and animalistic yet alien appearance, it becomes a proxy for cosmic horror narrative and an existential threat. As with Apocria, Swarm's actors are agents of chaos, but for the Swarm, the opposition is existence without acknowledgement of self as the single entity. Void beings and their contrasts to the natural originals is far more notable even when undeath as a trope is excluded from this spectrum of horror. It is then void monsters whose origin sets a varying degree of viscera and detail of this specific category of body horror, emerging through the art style. And since it is left up to interpretation, the potential for the horror of the setting and game present through their aesthetics become far more expansive when focused upon and explored. The void, by its definition, is a lack of matter, a nothing. But in the speculative fiction and mythology, the void can become a tangible substance, which does exist and can be perceived, compared to a concept of absence. Moreover, the void is the fundamental primordial state of existence of an ocean before existence itself found in most Western and Eastern creation myths, up to Mesopotamian creation myth. The case of void in Spiral Knights is this exact case, as the void, albeit coupled with the Swarm, is an essence which can be observed, reshaped, and its effects perceived and studied within a set environment of unknown passage. Water-like composition of the void, where it is observed, allows for recognition of a specific symbol, a deep water to become associated with the concept of unknown. As we get unknown passage, as the definitive unknown location of at that point largely explored clockworks, as Swarm's presence emerges from below, coupled with the descent narrative, it frames the water, like quality of the void, as one attributed to the depths of an ocean. This is a noteworthy contributing factor to the impression of the Swarm as an entity which embodies those themes of unknowable, as pointed in that direction by the Echo Stone. While we intentionally have not discussed gameplay elements, apart from context of the equipment, we believe we should discuss the significance of remote combat within the setting. Specifically, we are interested in the concept of bullet hell and its application across the setting against faction. As knights are connected to close combat through terminology, the anachronistic, medievalistic theming, they suggest predominantly close combat through cold arm. As more magical and occult motifs are presented into the setting, we have linked those through concept of alchemy to that medieval age, to which additions are made from the nature of futuristic setting in the form of applied and studied alchemy. Alchemy is more distinct magitech element, with a semi-magical metaphysical foundation, and through magic ranged combat is in part accessed. Ranged combat is achieved either through sci-fi context of technologically advanced civilizations, such as gremlins or Iserons, or magic, those being Devilites, Cats, and Owlite. Defining element of Bullet Hell is the presence and recognition of patterns of projectiles, which emerges from the idea of this type of combat, overtaking the entire playable area at its limit. Bullet Hell, by its arcade nature, truncates the complexity of the firearm into the complexity of the strategies of evasion of its projectile. Through that approach, we can identify instances of dodging projectiles. Segments of Jigsaw Valley have gun puppies set in a maze, through which Knight has to traverse, while gun pup as turrets fire their respective patterns, corresponding to their tier. In clockwork tunnels, occasionally, an arena can be found behind an energy door. Those arenas may contain a dormant battle pod, and this battle pod often is a source of patterns of bullets reaching entirety of an arena. Majority of slime family of monsters has a property of ranged attacks, specifically when polyp-type enemy of monsters is placed in a strategic pattern on the arena, like segments, which allows for the aforementioned conditions of Bullet Hell to emerge. Snarbalak's ranged attacks of spikes can be considered as such, increasing across tiers of clockworks firing patterns of gun puppies and howitzers. The latter ends with a homing attack reminiscent of rocket puppies. Bullet spread and rocket attacks of Romulus Twin. Both Iron Claw, Munitions Factory, Romulus Twins, and Cirrus's Arena at Engines of War present a case of dodging projectiles. Loose patterns of lasers on the arena of Big Iron. Ghost in Machine already has a few arenas where projectiles possess patterns as an environmental hazard. Undead Spookots present a need in dodging projectiles, finalizing a Margro fight. While there is no distinct, larger pattern, Margro with summoned black cats presents a case of a need to be constantly aware of the battle arena and its layout, despite lack of distinct pattern. Swarm possesses properties of Bullet Hell to a degree, mostly due to content and arena-wide presence of turret. While those do not have a pattern to their attacks, the presence of bullets should be acknowledged. Relative development of this design, we suggest, can be found in the final arena of Dreams and Nightmares, as 4 turrets are being orbited by projectiles in a simple pattern. A well as presence of void souls requires managing and monitoring the arena, using similar to Bullet Hell strategy. Cursed magic of Lord Vanaduk's mask at his intermediate stages. This is most direct, distinct, and undiluted by other mechanics instance of Bullet Hell to date. Lord Vanaduk presents the highest importance to this subject. While we have yet to cover the concept which explains the symbolic significance of Firestorm Citadel, Katabasis, a descent into metaphorical underworld, Firestorm Citadel presents itself as the final bastion in localized hell. There, the significance of Bullet Hell is found in the nature of its presence within the mask, making both the mask a subject of metaphysics of curse, but also links this instance of Bullet Hell in its most complex to date form, which even changes players' perspective. With consideration of other instances, we suggest that Bullet Hell is a method of presenting fantasy theme designs into the setting, but also a broader notion of conveying power of a wielder through pattern. As Lord Vanaduk presents an extreme of curses, we suggest, by referring to Romulus Twins and other constructs, a different direction of this notion can be potentially found through advanced gremlin weaponry possessing complex patterns, gremlin and construct themed variation of refined Bullet Hell combat, parallel to magic-themed intermediate phases of Lord Vanaduk's fight, compared to Solitude of Blame as out-referential megastructure. Cradle has physically present creators, those being gremlin. As we have discussed other species, either more obscure or less prevalent to the current time frame, gremlins exist not in an isolated narrative, but in the present system as the primary civilization. Gremlins are most native to Clockworks due to consistent coupling of the two. From this association of gremlins with the megastructure, additional tropes locations, and narratives can be built which contribute both to character depth of Gremlins and the character of the megastructure itself through variety of latter's presences, now identified through intersection with the region. As with other species, there is a distinct, albeit subjective perception of Gremlins, born their role, appearance, and behaviors within the setting. We intend to explore the elements of that compound image. Gremlin's presence initially fills the gaps between story arcs of rank missions while being the underlying narrative tied to clockworks as the base setting. Gremlin's role within the narrative of rank mission is one of depicted failure to be an actualized threat. The episodic setup of their arcs contributes to this, with the central exception being the swarm and core narrative. In the rest of the cases, this episodic nature is identified by repeated successes of spiral order in preventing the threat. Moreover, the stakes of those episodic threats remain relatively on the same level since they do not make substantial reappearance, such cases being the rematch with the Collector, Sparkcaster subplots, and various infiltrations of Gremlin service and military facilities, with more elaborate setup present for Romulus Twin. This comical episodic nature conceals the larger plot revolving around, initially, Herrick's and later Swarm and the Core. This larger in comparison plot is framed as more substantial through the deliberate setup of plot details, such as the reasons behind Spark and Roar mission, anomalous state of hidden hideout, search of the schematics at Complex 357, and at the very beginning, retrieval of the artifact from the laboratory. Yet, until Herrick's plot becomes central to the story followed after other substantial arc of Kingdom of Almir, the prior Gremlins arc set up the aforementioned image of Gremlins as comic relief villains, against which eldritch horror of the swarm as essential to Cradle's past marginally contrast. The single-player campaign, when it is completed without a party of 4, can further emphasize this character by creating a sense of absurdity in Gremlin's operations, since they can be intercepted by a single Azoran Knight. Such efforts are found through the plots of Romulus Twins, Operation Crimson Hammer, and intermediate missions, such as the Vile Engine or Compound 42, where a single knight or a group of knights manages to disable various weapons deeply related to militaristic motif of Gremlin. As this happens, Gremlins are still positioned as ones in control of the megastructure, with this image of control failing throughout the campaign by Herrick's undisrupted successes. Gremlin's animalistic, sharp, and jagged through fur-bearing and carnivore features appearance coexist with their role as most present and advanced civilization of builders. It is juxtaposed to civil appearances and non-hostile design of Isrins, that stand in for humanity and assume strict, through clear definition organization of spiral order. Spiral order is framed to appear as an opposite to hazardous designs of Gremlin environments and equipment. Oversized wrenches as weapons, exaggerated tools, grunting sound design, hierarchy with depicted ill organization, and totalitarian motifs contributing to Gremlin's resulting role of comic relief villain. Although later throughout the story danger and tone of Gremlins changes, specifically after the King of Ashes, the starting position, the first impression of Gremlins, provides the foundations for further transformation and subversion of their image as the narrative becomes less episodic and more serious. First impression we noted earlier in relation to Gremlins is found in the tutorial, specifically at the Ancient Generator mission. Due to scale of the tutorial, Gremlins are characterized in a much shorter time period, as Razwog, his facility and implications of greater organization being present. There the artifact is stolen despite, in retrospect, Razwog's facility being essential to actualization of Herrick's plot. The tutorial framing sets several restrictions on this stage, which shape image of Gremlins as failing in their duties to a single knight. The tutorial appears to encapsulate at an introductory scale all aspects of the story proper in order to initially captivate the player. We will later showcase how the tutorial and entirety of rank missions operate under the common narrative framework of the monomyths, specifically its variation as a descend narrative. The other consequence of this framing of Gremlins as comic relief is found in the lore-rooted perspective of Gremlins as a failing empire. Gremlins' infrastructure is found in a deteriorating state. This concept exists with the idea of Gremlins being ones to build the megastructure, and ones to be trapped in it after creation of the swarm. Through multiple elements of architecture, we have proposed that the megastructure is slowly failing and falling under third parties' control of Underworld, while most of it, by the time Spiral Order arrives, had remained operational. This deterioration was found in the Ironclaw Munitions Factory, the non-gremlin inhabited and overtaken depths, haunted passages, slime ways, shadow layers. Through the story and event mission, a distinct motif appears of a loss of control of gremlins over Cradle. Whether those powers are of undeath, eldritch, or of underworld, this was the thesis we had made the final summary of the timeline. The megastructure now imprisons the builders, who are in an internally and externally unstable position, leading to a formation of dehumanizing environment seen in designs and architecture of Emberlight and separate Crimson Order, adjacent necessities to which heaven exists as a distinct thematic, architectural, ideological, political, societal, and therefore narrative opposite. The occasional elements of imperial architecture, such as surface entrance of complex 357 Grand Arsenal, designs of Crimson Order contrast both with the general disarray and the rest of Common Clockwork's architecture apart from the consoles. We propose reveal the importance of militism for identity of Gremlin. Generally darker tone of their late-game narrative then takes place as the primary narrative after no less emotionally heavy arc of Firestorm Citadel in comparison to prior arcs. Leading up to the unique-to-rank missions, only a reveal of the swarm edit came from below, with reveal of corresponding elements of cosmic horror of proper to Cradle scale, which now does not appear as out of place due to the pre-existing foundation, such as the core being presented as a concrete location among the totality of architecture of Clockwork. Amplification of the stakes within the narrative sourced from Gremlins. Herix is possible as long as the other component of that relation, the megastructure, accommodates it since it was characterized throughout prior unrelated to the endgame plot narratives, while also being inseparable from Gremlins by being their creation. Megastructure is ever present throughout the campaign and arcade, and so are Gremlins, side and outside of the pacing of rank mission. As the megastructure, by one of its inherent properties, is an instrument of environment storytelling and a character, and one of large physical scale and narrative potential, while being related to Gremlins, the observed expansion of the narrative remains natural. While nature and character of Gremlins is juxtaposed to the megastructure and Iserons, the bi-directional effect Gremlins have onto it remains natural due to transparency of this relation, and of its revelation to the current narrative of the campaign, personal narrative of the Claire, and the larger timeline, wherein the latter is reflected in the regions of the megastructure. This idea of an empire, of what we propose to be Gremlin civilization initially alien to Cradle prior to creation of Clockworks, led by the figure of a Gremlin king, followed by the change in trajectory of the state after a crucial event we suggest, is an extension of Gremlin's character. It can be viewed as part of a pre-existing motif of failing state, utilizing the principle observed in Almire by briefly showcasing what Almire was at some point through Crusader's armor and furniture, now as a sequence of causally interconnected events within a timeline, despite simplicity and unreliability of its narrators as sources of information. In order to achieve a desired effect of a time of seeming prosperity being gone, its traces are left as architecture from that era, as consoles, representative of greater connection with the celestial nature of the core, and myth-like descriptions of figures preserved and told by the means of comparison and contrast. The scale of Clockwork as a megastructure contributes to this impression since it demands from Gremlins, as its assumed builders, to be expected to be capable of building clockworks in the first place. Within the context of Gremlins as species juxtaposed to Iserons, such role appears contradictive in universe and out of universe for this civilization at the current point in time, which allows for a further expansion of the image of what Gremlins were in the past in the same direction as Kingdom of Almir was framed by multiple recounts before it fall. As in the discussion of symbolism of bullet hell, the present mundane bleakness of gremlin existence becomes essential for supernatural grace to be found and perceived to the same extent. Because of this contrast, we have focused on aforementioned designs and the myth-like character of Gremlin King, even without his proper presence. To the same extent, it can be extracted from the identification of the triad of planet's name, Cradle, a deity named Sleeper, vulnerable in slumber, and artificial, semi-celestial clockwork's megastructure. Those components were defined by an absent genius Gremlin King as we proposed as means of counting down to deity's awakening. It is a divine plan created by cooperation of a deity and a man in the face of an existential threat, stemming from Gremlin's ideology of iron law, totalitarian nature of their existence, focus on development of weapons and military. What we have just poetically identified is the phenomenon of ontology, of a vision of a future that never came into existence. And yet, the present has no means to reach this future. The present is in advance haunted by its other, in our case, the past. We propose this narrative serves an essential element to the Gremlin character. In the present, imperial tendencies manifest as ideas put into iron law, and then in the actual production and application of weapons. The universe grime of Clockwork's orientation on technology and militaristic ideology allow for a distinct image to be formed. Those connections allow for Gremlin civilization to be rooted in reality despite its fantastical setting, while implicitly emphasizing the difficulties of such existence, among other instances reflected in Emberlight and Grand Arsenal. The regime itself is enforced by the Crimson Order, as observed through the missions, existing within the culturally same environment. While we iterate on the prior points which were relevant to the swarm's conception, here the motif itself must be acknowledged as a part of a greater idea of the structure failing, the stasis cradle and gremlins exists in, which, due to internal to the megastructure eldritch in its perceived nature threat, slowly deteriorates the megastructure and affects gremlins. This erosion provides means of nuance and moral ambiguity which can be escalated into appearance of agents of chaos, such example being Herix, while allowing for further characterization to be established through environments with minimal dialogue or exposition. As for the time before those events and the theoretical origin of imperial motif, we have previously proposed the concept of early Gremlin Empire, characterized by an open core, complete alliance of gremlins with the deity shielded within the core, and presence of the Gremlin King. This period is characterized most distinctly design of consoles, unique to them technology, and divine clockwork tunnel. Another unifying principle of those elements is the application of hues of white, blue, and yellow colors, opposed to red, white, and black, of Crimson Order and its totality of inspiration. The clockworks, bearing yellow and black, exist between those factions and ideology. Lastly, there are three musical compositions associated with gremlins: Roar of the Munitions Factory, Metal of a Gremlin, and King Tinkenza's Command. Clockwork's confidential. My big question is, how do you set out to write tracks? Is it anything like, hey, so I'm scoring a poison-themed strata? Let's figure out some venomous-sounding intervals and samples, or is it much more complex than that? I like to find out everything first about what I'm composing for. Helpful things include concept art, descriptions of the area, getting to play it, knowing what mood we want the players to feel. If we rely on to those principles, we can make a suggestion that the aforementioned pieces have all the details required to assemble an image of gremlins reflected in the game. In this regard, gremlins become a fusion of comically failing villainy, animalistic hostile design, internal struggle and effective militaristic environment of this struggle. Those elements are then truncated through the medium of the game, its visual and audio design, creating an initially unserious image oscillating between a nuanced one. Those contrasts are later explored across the rank missions narratives, and more implicitly through Clockwork's architecture as resulting from in-universe gremlin vision and engineering. While the larger narrative indeed is prioritized in the latter half of the campaign, it is itself assembled of a varying degree of seriousness, in oscillation across individual rank mission, while being built on top of the prior story arc. While not extensively discussed, this idea of oscillation we propose is found across entirety of the game, and not restricted to Gremlin's characterization specifically, but can be attributed to them at each step of our discussion of Gremlin presence as part of game's identity. This configuration, while reductive, we suggest is a manifestation of oscillation as it is presented in metamodernism, as the concept of oscillation provides the greater gradient of substance to grip onto, providing greater array of points of connection across the narrative beyond its initial framing. This modernism is characterized by the oscillation between a typically modern commitment and a markedly postmodern detachment. We will call this structure of feeling metamodernism. These positions can most appropriately be summarized, perhaps by Jos de Mul's distinction between postmodern irony, encompassing nihilism, sarcasm, and the distrust and deconstruction of grand narratives, the singular and the truth, and modern enthusiasm encompassing everything from utopism to the unconditional belief in reason. In application to Spiral Knights as a game, we suggest a following characterization. McDowell describes quirky as a recent trend in indie cinema characterized by the attempt to restore to the cynical reality of adults a childlike naivety as opposed to the postmodern smart cinema of the 1990s, which was typified by sarcasm and indifference. As discussed above, we believe the character depth of Gremlins had been in part in their appearances as animalistic, which are then juxtaposed to their role as builders and engineers. As we have discussed the compound elements of Megastructure's architecture in order to understand the aforementioned relation, we intend to dissect properties of Gremlins, not as the builders of that megastructure with a character, but primarily a standalone species through a series of relations, associations, and potential inspiration. Industrial theming is essential to Clockwork's and Gremlin uniform. Industrial yet slim designs are reminiscent of Spiral Order armor, but with greater accent on cloth rather than metal. This industrial motif must be looked at in the context of Gremlin's name. If the name of Gremlin is to originate from the relatively modern folklore of aircraft construction during wartime, then relation to technology becomes inherent to their identity, as in the folklore Gremlins were essential to the very idea of aircraft malfunction. Then, relation through malfunction is subverted as Gremlins become the engineers and builders of the megastructure rather than the source of its malfunction on a base level. Yet they retain the mischievous character and haphazard danger of the workplace, while the malfunction narrative is transformed to be the result of the societal unease of Gremlin. The 20th century industrial designs of Clockworks, the designs of Gremlin uniforms paired with the militarism and internal instability of the organization during games events. Those elements may be viewed as a postmodern exploration defined by continuous struggle, a metal of a gremlin even, and appearances devoid of romanticization. Both a point on its own and continuation of the above argument exists in the idea of aircraft gremlins being part of fey folk of folklore, which in broader context was conceived in an attempt to explain the concept of unknown through identification of distinct actors, spirits, imps, fey folk, demons, ghosts, gnomes, and so on. It sets the initial characteristic of gremlins as elusive, mischievous, and part of greater sphere of unknown as its extension and presence in the known world. But the gremlins of Spiral Knights have a distinct design which, through existence of Grinchline clan revolving around Winterfest, leads us to suggest a more recent and more probable source of inspiration. A Christmas-themed Gremlins movie of year 1984, which we will discuss now. The Gremlins establishes the animalistic anatomy of Mogwai and a corresponding gremlin transformation. Mogwai given their furry appearance compared to reptilian appearances of gremlins, have a possibility of being utilized as a component of Cradle's Gremlins design. It is important to emphasize that we do not possess the knowledge of the creative process itself, its multi-step process of continuous iteration and of evolution of the concept from an initial to the final design, of what came to be the source of inspiration and were there at a certain point in influence to be found in Spiral Tides. We will work from a perspective wherein both movies Gremlins and Spiral Knights Gremlins do reinvent the idea taken from an aircraft folklore of Fey folk gremlins, and then we will compare the design, anatomy, and character. Cradle's Gremlins anatomy, compared to plantigrade anatomy of Mogwai as a fully developed interstellar civilization, has properties similar to ones of the anatomy of Gremlins, such as bipedal digitigrade method of locomotion and anatomical proportion. By the very act of using digitigrade design, an implicit emphasis is performed on animalistic features of the species, which contrasts their human-like intelligence, skills of organization, and cooperation. This is the perspective on the earlier symbolic notion discovered in the capacity to build a megastructure. Sound of Gremlins may invoke a sense of it being raspy, with occasional usage of consonants, which is relatively similar not only to gremlins, but smaller mammals of real world, with higher tonalities. This allows to perceive gremlins as vermin-like in human or Isoran perception. The character, in particular the behavior, is seemingly inherited from gremlins, both after transformation and of second-generation Mogwai, unless the behavior of first-generation Mogwai, such as Gizmo, is not characteristic of gremlins' natural habitat. The behavioral aspect and folklore nudge to relation with technology is also found in the movie. If we take in prior inspirations of Elf, like human design of gremlins before the Gremlins movie defined their more recent appearances, we have to attribute the presence of fur and animal-like behavior as the design choices both for Spiral Knights Gremlins and Gremlins, wherein Gremlin of Cradle are given time to become a highly advanced civilization. Unfortunately, no other work of art we had found that had reinvented a folklore gremlin with an anthropomorphic design. This similarity led us to propose that Gremlins movie could have been a potential inspiration for the furred animalistic design. It is important to emphasize that we do not know whether the name came to be the first, with the design to follow after into the system of relations with machinery. At that point, we already possess in Rodir a different gremlin, a gremlin of Cradle, which managed to incorporate an environmental aspect, behavioral, and an anatomical through subversion, reconstruction, direct utilization, and exploration of those concepts. The impression of organic emergence of those individual concepts in Spiral Knights gremlin species, we suspect, emerges from careful consideration of each of those properties, which betrays our unfamiliarity with the process of the development in this analysis. The anatomical differences of Gremlins Mogwai and its gremlins to Cradle's gremlins may be found in a selective merging of Mogwai and gremlins traits as suggested above, and followed by further development of the species designs, until they would be seen to fit a setting where they are perceived as the unique spacefaring civilization. As far as we are about to reach a conclusion, apart from this attempt to rarefy a compound element of the design, among those discussions we should emphasize the creative process itself as the source of perceived, interpreted, and reimagined ideas manifested in distinct designs and delivered through multimodal medium of a video game and culture it possesses. According to the Gremlins, 1943, by Roald Dahl, folklore gremlins had settled in machinery. We have noted on it in previous section, and here we will reference the folklore-based setting in attempt to compare its narrative with one of Cradle. Through this logic, a similar scenario manifests at civilization wide scale for Cradle's gremlins. This change of habitation from natural to mechanical by means of external force may be extrapolated onto the potential of Spiral Knight's universe, with the megastructure being the current embodiment of a new mechanical home. While this relation applies for folklore gremlins, Spiral Knight's gremlins expand on this, as noted in the first relation. The prior grim depiction of gremlins as rooted in industrial processes coexists with other notions. Romantic depiction, also found through their king, his mythologization and highly symbolic presence of consoles, as most advanced technology, integrate and acknowledge to the highest degree the architecture outside of clockworks. The castles and fortresses which represent medievalism this setting possesses, therefore interfacing with it and integrating it. This acknowledgement through architecture provides a way out of the industrial and postmodern into ontology of the past, in the same manner one may consider castles and bastions surviving into the present with their historical context, preserved. Compared to previous discussed iterations of gremlins, due to the depth and scale we can observe a further development of gremlins' relation to technology through designs of their weapons, uniforms, and particular goggles. We intend to focus of goggles in greater capacity due to how they will allow us to bridge into the uncanny and horror aspects of Spiral Knight's universe, as it is presented through the medium of the game. Presence of goggles is, by margin, we suggest, is the defining feature of gremlin design, going beyond the alchemical aesthetics of minerals, existing separate from gremlin's gremlin. Both the slitted and circular designs of lenses possess a potential for application within a distinct set context and theme. In order to articulate this practice, we will reiterate on the initial identification of goggles design through gremlin named Grote in the narrative of Total Catastrophe as our entry point. Grote as Tier 2 and 3 gremlins, as friendly gremlins and gremlins of Ember Light, as well as the default state of gremlin goggles. Accessory possess slitted design, which while may convey, depending on the context, the mischievous nature of gremlins, here we place it against goggles design of Tier 3 gremlins, and possess state of Grote in the possessed state with pink lenses, Tier 3 gremlins with purple lenses, and Void gremlins with pink inner glow, as a particular case of body horror, are grouped by the circular design which, independent of lore, can be identified as horror-centered. It is when we apply the context of the respective narratives this horror element connects back to the designs of its bearer. Void gremlins, as other void monsters, appear as void replicas of most weaponized variants of regular natural enemies. Grote is possessed by an artificial creation which, while may not be as important in the current context, even incorporates curse into itself. Darkfang gremlins, as tier changes, are more distinct in their design, while being the only group with circular goggles. This circular design, we suggest, is even found on the cover artwork of the Steam release of the game, being worn by a gremlin at the foreground facing the Knights. If horror aspect were to be developed further, as it appears fitting in that case, could it be that the purple accent color of those monsters was meant to hint the swarm from the very beginning, rather than being the artistic and composition choice for the artwork? Through this design, we can identify a unifying principle of conveying a sense of fright. We can tie to it grotesque depictions of wolvers, with circular burning eyes as also representative of animalistic hostility, which is present, essential for gremlins, as more animalistic in contrast to their role as builder. The sense of fright and animalistic hostility connects to unpredictability and unknown intent through act of concealing one's eyes. This application is less hostile in its base nature, which allows for a different context and function of this design to be found. The goggles act of concealing part of wearer's identity. Most importantly, their eyes achieve the effect of mystery or unknown, attributed to instances of masked character. This effect may not have been possible if no goggle were present. To compare, we may look at Cirrus' design as the only gremlin with visible eyes. While Cirrus is an outlier in this regard, this choice to reveal part of species physiology allows for more creative potential of gremlins as a species. On the other end of the spectrum, there are strangers and gremlins of Haven whose faces are hidden behind symbols, a wide sharp grin, and one lit circular eye in case of punch, or general asymmetric design of native to Heaven stranger. Those notions exist between the above extreme effects of goggles or general obscurity in consideration of the desired emotional response those designs are meant to evoke. Such example being Gremlin sharp designs mixed with Stranger's asymmetrical designs, resulting in Haven Gremlin's masks of punch and vice. This considered, we present the subjectively deconstructed logic behind Gremlin's design. 1. Fey folk gremlins inhabit and harm technology, emerging as a folklore of malfunctioning technology during wartime. 2. Gremlins, the movie, introduced animalistic anatomy and reframed gremlins in a different, postmodern cultural context. The military and technology-related origins of its ancestors are acknowledged, as well as general motif of technology failing. These gremlins preserve now expanded character traits beyond causing strictly the technology to malfunction. The relation with the technology is depicted as if Mogwai shown general, non-intrusive interest in technology, rather than being direct reason for its malfunction. While gremlins do cause harm to the technology, Spiral Knights gremlins took as foundation furred anatomy reminiscent of Mogwai, digitigrade characteristic and proportions of gremlins, and general mischievousness of their character with added cultural background underpinning entirety of Spiral Knights as a game. The relation to technology becomes positive, but haphazard nature remains. As a mechanical habitat, it is expanded from a factory or an aircraft to a mechanical megastructure to accommodate for the scale of a new setting. The relation to technology at interstellar level became the extrapolation of this subverted property of folklore gremlins in direct manner, compared to Gremlins movie still inhabiting it but now at all societal aspects, not as aircraft, but a megastructure. The Eldritch narrative is injected through a means of explaining the plausibly operational nature of the megastructure, as it would require a fantastical source of energy, herein integrated into the story. The Magitech, which given already Lovecraftian narrative of the endgame, is integrated through general metaphysics of magic, as it is established outside of Cradle. That way, the megastructure also acknowledges magic by utilizing it in many of its aspects to the same degree Izarons do through alchemy. Wartime aircraft folklore found itself in the militarism, internal struggle, and industrial aesthetic. Wartime folklore introduced foundational human nature to gremlins as caricature villains. This context with inclination on military conflict presents a ground from which horror can re-emerge subtly as part of gremlin identity, while itself being potentially a concrete case of encoded into games aesthetics capacity to exercise horror. In particular, this aesthetic allows for horror-oriented framing of animalistic features of gremlins. Gremlin's character is engineered from the contrast and exploration of complex technology being wielded by species of highly animalistic, semi-comedic, and militaristic design. In relation to Cradle and Gremlins, Megastructure's connection with the setting and its metaphysics, humanity of Gremlins is one of the more important factors which contribute to the impression, image, and feel of the setting. Without given themes nor gremlins as proxies for the narrative behind Cradle's existence and the megastructure, both the story and the setting would not be the same as they are currently perceived, revealing a bidirectional and essential connection between Cradle and Gremlin. Tier 3 of Clockworks presents the later arcs which may be viewed as more grim and nuanced. Identification of a transition at Built to Destroy from Tier 2 to Tier 3 of Clockworks is the separating boundary, after which several steps are taken in solidifying a new darker tone of the game, illuminating Clockworks and corresponding narratives within this tier in a more serious light. Both the megastructure and the struggle of Gremlin renders them human, and yet they bear most animalistic appearance of any sentient, humanly relatable civilization. Sentience of Gremlin extends definition of human condition outside of human or Izaran body by being a different culture and different species. The concept of a soul makes reappearance here, as through metaphysics of material realm, it is viewed as capable of being separable from the body. All of the narratives regarding manipulation of souls, the apocrypha on death and haunting and more direct body horrors of mutation, such as cases of Lord Vanaduk, Trojans, and Gorgos, present the case of body horror as native to this universe element, coexisting with a relation between a soul and malleable body. Consciousness can be lost in lost souls and undead. souls themselves are also an energy resource and can be treated as such, rather than containers of consciousness. This dual nature of souls has volatile identity from a defined consciousness to a memory, and a container of energy is present both in science fiction and fantasy narratives, manifested differently across this spectrum. Then there is the body, transformation of which also goes along the changes in one's mind. The bodily experience of the world, while different between gremlins and isurans, still allows to recognize each other's human condition. It is not exact for both, but overlapping. Gremlins are placed into an environment which inherently critiques the industrialization by being a megastructure, yet they are the driving force behind it as its engineers and builders. Through this narrative, gremlins become also a self-conscious warning. Compared to isurans, gremlins are more technologically developed. Their culture is severely obscured by their regime rooted in reality, and the instinct nature of their animalistic bodies as the source of visual distinction. Gremlin's body, from human perspective of an anthropomorphic fictional animal, is given by a matter-of-fact a complex role of being a civilization. It merges instincts of an animal as extension of animalistic appearance with recognition of human condition. In this contrast is shaped as one of central element which makes their case valid as it is observed in game, of a contrast of the alien and familiar, of animal body and shared humanity. Discussed the aesthetics of Spiral Knights, we identified three essentials which would formulate the experience of Cradle, those being the nature of Cradle's non-mechanical regions, clockworks themselves, and the medium of the game which allows the player to perceive Cradle through a perspective of an Isuran Knight and outsider to ecosystems of Cradle. The prior idea of a change in pace of narration and feel of the story, the general tone shift towards a more serious, can be observed both through the events of Rescue Camp, introductory part of the game, and the entire progression up to the endgame at the Shadow Layers and the core. This element is part of the concept of the monomyth, as it is defined by Joseph Campbell in his work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. The mythological hero, setting forth from his common-day hut or castle, is lured, carried away, or else voluntarily proceeds to the threshold of adventure. There he encounters a shadow presence that guards the passage. The hero may defeat or conciliate this power, and go alive into the kingdom of the dark, offering charm, or be slain by the opponent and descend in death. Beyond the threshold, then, the hero journeys through a world of unfamiliar yet strangely intimate forces, some of which severely threaten him, some of which give magical aid. When he arrives at the nadir of the mythological round, he undergoes a supreme ordeal and gains his reward. The triumph may be represented as the hero's sexual union with the goddess, mother of the world, his recognition by the Father Creator, his own divinization, or again, if the powers have remained unfriendly to him, his theft of the boon he came to gain. Final work is that of the return. If the powers have blessed the hero, he now sets forth under their protection. If not, he flees in his pursuit. At the return threshold, the transcendental powers must remain behind. The hero re-emerges from the kingdom of dread. The boon that he brings restores the world. Many tales isolate and greatly enlarge upon one or two of the typical elements of the full cycle: test motif, flight motif, abduction of the bride. Others string a number of independent cycles into a single series, as in the Odyssey. Differing characters or episodes can become fused, or a single element can reduplicate itself and reappear under many changes. Both the Rescue Camp arc, as the tutorial, and the entirety of rank missions follow this pattern. Yet since tutorial is much shorter in its duration, it allows for more concise separation of its progression onto stages of the monomyth. A call to adventure. It begins when a hero is ready for transformation, willingly or not. The change may be violent and accompanied by introduction of a herald of crisis, representative of unknown world. For Isorans, in his catastrophic arrival to the surface of Cradle. While this place is an unknown planet, the tutorial aspect frames it in a most friendly manner, placing it before the threshold into the unknown. Aid. Encounter of a mentor being the aid and assistance. Introduction to other surviving members of Spiral Order. Threshold Guardian. Confrontation with Ironwood Sentinel. For the entirety of rank missions, it is Razwag, whose plot already hints at a larger narrative reaching the very end of the campaign. Threshold. Arrival to the rescue camp. Challenges. Prior to plunging into the Abyss are the recovery of the artifact and powering of the camp. The artifact is located below the camp, which announces a descent into the further unknown. Symbolic Death. It is encountered during an expedition to Haven, crossing the chasm, which is framed as a dangerous expedition, as the artifact had to be given up to Razwell. Transformation. Burning of the facility, being a symbol of fiery abyss wherein a transformation of the hero follows, though symbolic and literal fire. Rebirth. By traversing the symbolic abyss, the knight defeats Razwell. Atonement. Encounter of Farum and ascent from the facility. Return. Arrival to Haven. We consider it part of the known world due to presence of the Spiral Order there, being the safest location both in the tutorial and across rank missions, located atop of the unknown proper of the totality of Clockworks. The arcs cross of rank mission comprise a sequence of enclosing narratives as the stakes across the plot increase, while possessing a 3-act story structure of initiation, confrontation, and resolution in relative scale. The first complete narrative was a tutorial with its role of presenting, smallest scale, the act of descending into Clockwork. It was then expanded significantly through the events of a new threat, eventually leading to the boss arcs as investigations into Cradle's ecosystemic richness. The story finally reached the Kingdom of Almire arc, which explicitly unites Megastructure and the regions through the relevance of Herex's plots past the King of Ashes mission. As in Shadowplay, the console becomes central to the plot and up to dreams and nightmares, acknowledging the previously sparse hints of the largest narrative of the campaign. The continuous progression and escalation of stakes allows for a different perspective rooted in the gameplay itself to emerge, reminiscent of Gerbj-esque escalation of power, colloquially represented as a contrast between the tutorial enemies, stakes and plots in their endgame evolution, represented by Kingdom of Almire arc, and followed by Eldritch appearance of the Swarm. Between those states, a new threat becomes a threshold, providing a significant escalation of stakes in preparation of a greater scope narrative. With it begins a phase of exploration, driven by search of the Alpha Squad, while exploring the Clockwork. This act consists of episodic villains, Underworld, Arcus, Romulus twins, Trojans, elaboration on cessation of owlites, and nature of cats. And then it escalates and merges into the single narrative through introduction of arc centered on passing through the Firestorm Citadel to the core. An important note must be made in relation to Lord Vanaduk, as one denoting as Herex, its scope and narrative. As Spiral Order had studied history of Almire, from its initial state to directly facing Master of the Realm, his story possesses more screen time and impact through many-sided characterization of Almire. Lord Vanaduk dies by the hand of the Knight in the throne room of Firestorm Citadel. Lore, why is the center of Almire, whether or not Darkfire Firestorm Citadel is treated as canon. There, Lord Vanaduk retains his role as a cursed monarch of a fallen realm, but with addition of him being forcibly brought to life again, in accordance to Undercorp's pattern of cruelty and consistency of their designs. Now with a specifically crafted armor from Underworld as much as other Underworld influenced beings attain their unique but similar in tune appearances. Lord Vanaduk, as residing in a localized depiction of hell near the bottom of Cradle, becomes the symbolic tyrant monster, as he had given up his humanity in order to reclaim the kingdom, and as his method was flawed from the start, the result of such reclamation was flawed by magnitudes, Manifested as a burning kingdom, the figure of the tyrant monster is known to the mythologies, folk traditions, legends, and even nightmares of the world, and his characteristics are everywhere essentially the same. He is the hoarder of the general benefit. He is the monster, avid for the greedy rights of mine and mine. The havoc wrought by him is described in mythology, and famed tale as being universal throughout his domain. This may be no more than his household, his own tortured psyche, or the lives that he blights with the touch of his friendship and assistance. Or it may amount to the extent of his civilization. The inflated ego of the tyrant is a curse to himself and his world, no matter how his affairs may seem to prosper. Self-terrorized fear, haunted, alert every hand to meet and battle back the anticipated aggressions of his environment, which are primarily the reflections of the uncontrollable impulses to acquisition within himself. The giant of self achieved independence is the world's messenger of disaster, even though, in his mind, he may entertain himself with human intention. Wherever he sets his hand there is a cry, if not from the housetops, then, more miserably, within every heart, a cry for the redeeming hero, the carrier of the shining blade, whose blow, whose touch, whose existence will liberate the land. The accumulation of those narratives as spanning across clockworks with symbolic value to them, they become stepping stones for the last narrative of Gremlins and the swarm through most detailed elaboration on Gremlins. Their many perspectives, through mystery of schematics, relief of Winterfest and Emberlight action sequences of Crimson Hammer, and ending at Planet's core, eventually merging the unifying and grounding element of Spiral Knights and Made in Abyss narratives is the verticality of the expedition. This verticality passes through the layers as self-contained regions and environments. Such progression organically fits with the pacing and structure of archetypal hero's journey and its variability. As Izarans were driven by a need of energy and left stranded on Cradle, or how Pull of the Abyss manifests in one's actions, those are prerequisites which allow for the myth to begin. Through the tone shift from beginning to the end of the game, through its narratives and environments, when applied to the spatially descending direction of hero's journey, the descent narrative reveals itself. The hero descends with divine assistance to the underworld where he performs an important task, has significant encounters with ghosts, and comes back alive to proceed successfully with the rest of his endeavors. As the abyss confronts the delver while revealing itself through its metaphysics, in Spiral Knights, clockworks are eventually superseded by presence of the swarm. And in that case, both clockworks and the swarm may be viewed as unnatural. The descent into the underworld within an established cosmology of Spiral Knights does not focus on the location of underworld, but a more metaphorical one, confrontation with the shadow and self, aspects which we previously attributed to the swarm in its alchemical and symbolic reading, while underworld was only observed through its effects on reality. The swarm is present. It becomes the metaphorical underworld through acknowledgement of the rest of reality. Shadow or void versions of previously encountered enemies assumes familiarity with them in the past, both the player and the swarm as a being. The presence of the swarm within broken or damaged environments of clockwork. Unknown Passage is seen as territory of the swarm operated by its laws through presence of lightning bolts, change in their color and color of infrastructure of the sky dome, serving as means of showcasing swarm's extreme degree of control and authority over this place. The infrastructure functions despite its crumbling state and different aesthetics, as if being possessed, reminiscent of Firestorm Citadel in its supernatural existence. Swarm is the opposites of previously established natural order of creatures inhabiting properly operational clockworks. Through those means, shadow layers become the shadow of natural reality, where Swarm's eldritch, fundamentally alien nature is central to the aesthetics of the experience. In this regard, cosmic horror becomes the modern means of delivering the idea of wrongness. Inaccessibility with exception, since the realm of the dead is characterized by its separation and estrangement from the realm of the living. The access of the living to such space is always something beyond exceptional. It cannot be absolutely inaccessible since, by definition, if it were inaccessible the KATABASIS could not exist. However, this space is usually protected by great obstacles. Among these obstacles, we often find a door, a great current of water, and a boatman, vast spaces of barren and burning lands. Sometimes everything at the same time. In the Mesopotamic tales of the Great Door, a very large door to hell is mentioned, located in the far west part of the region. The door can be reached after crossing a series of barren lands, a river that must be crossed with the help of the infernal boatman, and the border of the land, of no return. In Namu, in the netherworld, it appears as a pitiful path made by cart. Nevertheless, it is not only about obstacles. The KATABASIS implies a disruption of the laws of space and time, because the traveler goes to the land of the dead whilst he is still alive, even though that space should only be reached after death, and because this space is completely different from the one inhabited by the living. In this sense, it implies a transgression, because it contradicts the order of the world. Thus, only very special circumstances allow the transgression of a living being entering the realm of the dead, very special circumstances that have to do with the identity of the traveler and the existence of a divine mediator. This aspect is reflected in the current procedure of reaching and surviving shadow layers. Apart from the requirement of the key, the transition presumes complete mastery of skill within the rest of reality of Cradle. Extraordinary travelers and divine assistant. If the journey is extraordinary, it is presupposed that the traveler also needs to be extraordinary. The journey is therefore a test that will prove the exceptional status of the traveler, and what is to be obtained is also out of the ordinary. This is true in the case of gods, as well as in the case of men. The divinity has greater capabilities to travel to the netherworld, although he or she does not always have full freedom to take on this journey. But this status is not usually enough, since the protagonist normally requires divine assistance. When divine assistance that may legitimize the transgression is not provided, it is very difficult to attain one of the determinant factors of the KATABASIS, to return from the realm of the dead. In this sense, it is usually relevant to the success or failure of the journey whether the KATABASIS arises from a decision of the traveler, or if it is due to a request, since this usually has a relation with legitimating the trip. Motivations of the traveler. In the provisional definition of KATABASIS, I have insisted that the traveler has a purpose. Since the KATABASIS is the great journey, these purposes are of great importance. It may grant possession of special goods, access to superior knowledge, etc. The most common intention of the traveler is to bring something from the underworld. The repertoire of things to obtain is very wide. A genre that is particularly related to the KATABASIS is the extraordinary journey, often to the margins of the world. The tablet X of the Gilgamesh has many components of a KATABASIS. The hero starts a journey in search of the extraordinary gift of immortality. He must cross nearly impassable obstacles, like the door of the Masu mountain, guarded by scorpion men. He has people who assist him in his journey, like Siduri, who takes him before the boatman or Sanabi. The boatman then navigates the waters of death, carrying the hero to the presence of Utnapishtim. The journey ends with a partial failure. Gilgamesh obtains the plant of eternal youth, but it is taken away from him by a snake while the hero is bathing in a fountain. It is paradigmatic insofar as it marks the borders between God and men, between mortals and immortals, that the hero can transgress in a certain way, but his failure is an indication that the state of things cannot be modified. These are all the elements of a KATABASIS, except for the main one. Gilgamesh does not descend to the netherworld, nor the realm of the dead. Instead, he travels to remote spaces, to the margins of the world. When applied to narratives of Made in Abyss, both Rico and protagonist might possess a relation to the respective unknown. Rico's experience, her descent in the abyss, motivations for it, confrontations, and the depth her team reaches render them extraordinary. In case of the protagonist knight, while they do not possess an extraordinarity, They are at the forefront of Isuran exploration of Cradle, vanquisher of Vanaduk, and ones to descend into the shadow layers, experience a divine intervention at the end of Unknown Passage, and a communion through Echo Stone. The descent itself is the contents of KATABASIS, the events between the descent and ascent. The act of continuous descent presents an opportunity and a setting for the stories to exist and unfold, while the major narrative of reaching core is left in the background, only taking precedence in the final acts of the story, as the events accompanying the main quest create the desired theme. The Swarm, under this interpretation, is an embodiment of an archetypical shadow of hero's journey, one that requires action and confrontation from the protagonist. The fact that the Swarm is also an eldritch entity mirroring Isuran's and a need for energy of the core, but also in culmination of multitude of attempts of Underworld to siege Cradle, positions Spiral Orders as the most important faction within the history of Cradle, as we have proposed them being the next guardian of civilization. Difficulty, wise dreams, and nightmares, while are located deeper into the clockworks by the fact of being inside the core, they exist after first exploration of the Unknown Passage. We suggest that shadow layers symbolically, rather than technically, represent the darkest and deepest point of clockwork. If we are to introduce, even without the lore of Artifact's presence of Sanctuary, as a point of respite, layers within the hero's journey come to represent the death and rebirth at the lowest point of the journey, and one, by great margin, most difficult. The purpose of the journey may be more abstract. Very often the traveler seeks to gain knowledge or information of the underworld, or determine details that a specific deceased may know, considering that the dead may have special knowledge that is banned to men. Since the dead are out of the realm of time, those who have not lost their capabilities may be able to unite present, past, and future. If we take refuge in account, Alpha Squad does possess an instrumental knowledge on the Swarm and Sleeper, introducing deific property to late game narrative, while further expanding it and position the next most difficult point of the journey into the future. Through symbolic crossing of the threshold into the core, they are framed as lost, yet they are not, and they possess the knowledge of the true state of Cradle, which fits the position of the dead as entities in a different state of being bearing most special knowledge. Located physically above the core civilizations, are rendered trivial in front of an existential threat rooted at the physical foundations of the settings. The means of Cradle's existence, revolving around builders, megastructure itself, and its history, transit of the dead, and travel of the living. The KATABASIS assumes that human beings continue having a form of existence after death, even if it is precarious or wretched. As Gungeon OST pointed out, this should not be understood as the life of the soul after its separation from the body. Instead, for this mentality there exists a unit that is man that ceases to exist with the dissolution of the body, and that upon death passes to a new state. Dialogues with the dead, evocations, and dreams. The conversation with the dead is common also between the KATABASIS, and the evocation is like the apparition of the ghost of Darius to his wife Atassa in Aeschylus' Persian. In other occasions, the dead may appear to a living being without a ritual of evocation to tell him or her what goes on in the other world. In the case of Enkidu's descent, which starts in a failed KATABASIS, his soul comes out from a slit to instruct Gilgamesh on what happens in the netherworld. The deceased can also be seen in dreams, like Patroclus, who appears to Achilles in a dream. All these cases coincide with the KATABASIS in that there is a contact between the living and the dead. The deceased can provide special knowledge to the living. The apparition may dissuade from a bad ritual or moral behavior, or it may serve as a pretext to present imagery from the netherworld or advance information about the future. However, the evocations, apparitions, and dreams are different from a KATABASIS in that the living are passive, evoking, receiving, or dreaming, but they do not travel to the underworld, and they are not in danger. Now, with those notions in mind, we can apply them not only to Spiral Knights, but also the setting of Made in Abyss as one we referenced in terms of its aesthetics, which may allow us to identify the precise details of the descent narrative as it is observed in Spiral Knight. Identity of Cradle without its region would not allow us for a proper evaluation of the total variety of environments existing past Clockwork. The regions became an essential counterbalance to themes of Clockworks as a blade, like Megastructure. Then we introduced a narrative which aligns the perspective of the player and the character, the Knights, framing Cradle as unexplored territory. The specifics of this exploration were found in verticality and expeditions into this verticality, with complexity and variety of clockworks, amplifying as the expedition reaches the bottom, by reaching which a new perspective on Cradle is presented through. Made in Abyss, as Spiral Knights utilizes aesthetics, which may create a sense of coziness. In terms of positioning and contrast, this aesthetic serves different purpose, where, for example, on many notions, Made in Abyss places within it depictions of body horror at its front, which resonate more intensely because of it. The morality and humanity in those moments is both tested and exercised as an essential component of the themes Made in Abyss contain. Spiral Knights does not display horror in this direction, but rather relies on its subtle appearances with a vast space for interpretation, both through its design and placement of its story on the background for the core gameplay loop. Our prior discussion of Gremlins' design, their goggles in particular, is an example of the way Spiral Knight's aesthetic practices horror element. And then, when sufficiently focused upon, this approach allows for an emotional response by outsourcing it to the player to discover for themselves, or to resonate unconsciously, forming a rewarding feedback loop between aesthetics and the player. The cozy aesthetic is initially established by the art style and safety of the city of Orth and Haven. Both the city of Orth and Haven exist atop of the fantastical unknowns to descend into, the Abyss and Clockworks respectively, with greater degree of danger and fantasy of ecosystems being present as protagonists, reach the bottom. The unknown provides a variety within their settings, being the layers of the abyss or the regions and tier depths of Clockworks. In both cases, to reach them, there is only verticality as a medium, access either from the city or Haven's arcade as the points where the expedition for the Delvers begin. The verticality of Cradle is traversable only by elevators, while Abyss does not present such transport as widespread. In the end of the descent, fit within a narrative structure, milestones are presented to the protagonists to surpass. While Spiral Knight's narrative is at its most broad sense was extraction of the core's energy, access to the core was obstructed by emerging threats, and obstacles to be overpowered and reconciliated. Made in Abyss narrative is one of continuous confronting with manifestations of the Abyss as an extreme environment throughout each of its layers. In both cases, protagonist's surface goal had remained unchanged throughout the expedition, but its context and relation to the environment had expanded and deepened throughout the growing familiarity with the environment, be it nature of the core or the Ring of Light underpinned by experiences of prior layers. The unknown itself is separated into tiers and layers. There are stratums of clockworks, but they have less distinguished presence compared to tiers which translate into different enemy appearances. There is no curse of the abyss and repercussions from an ascent from the expedition, but there is a predominantly lore-focused excess of energy of the core which appears to be the source of shifting appearances across tiers as well as other metaphysical phenomena. This omnipresence is shared with the force field of the abyss as being related to the existence of curses, blessings, and concept of souls within the abyss. There are boundaries and challenges. Those define Knight's rank, or Delver's whistle color. They, albeit in different framing, are the result of overpowering physical boundaries and mastery over the unknown, Clockworks or the abyss. The physical boundaries emerge from actual physical restrictions placed onto the Delvers, but in the narrative of the protagonist, those are select few locations, being the absolute boundary at the 6th layer of the Abyss and Firestorm Citadel above the core. The core terminal of clockworks in either front, while may appear similar, they separate different realms. An ascent from the sixth layer is a miracle, and therefore present a life-changing choice for the delver, while the core permanently reframes nature of Cradle as one tied to eldritch narrative. Yet, both milestones are meant to showcase a greater scope of the setting, extending marginally beyond what was explored prior. There are artifacts of various grades across the Abyss. Clockworks offer materials and rarity items defined by star rating, resulting in creating of near-mythical gear. To the same extent, first grade and beyond artifacts may be perceived, be it a device immune to the metaphysics of the Abyss, or transcending time perfect replica of Almerian armor with immunity to curses. The Delvers embark on expeditions. They ascend and descend throughout rank missions as much as the protagonist. Only Hello Abyss team performs an irreversible descent with currently no ability to return by crossing the absolute boundary. But the significant and unique boundary is only crossed by a few. In case of Spiral Knights is found in the narrative surrounding descent into the core by the Alpha Squad and the protagonist. While not irreversible, it is a significant milestone within present cosmology. In case of Made in Abyss, those individuals are white whistles given the circumstances of attaining a white whistle. Due front within the Abyss, the forward operation base, and the core terminal are the last stable settlements which also operate as research facilities, albeit to a different extent and depth of character. In that regards to the crossing of the threshold, we can also draw parallels between framing of Alpha Squad and White Whistles, both representative of the best respective factions formerly possessed. As Alpha Squad descended the clockworks to the core in a single expedition, White Whistle's expertise within the Abyss is framed as unmatched. It is also here we note on the specifics of the Abyss of Made in Abyss, as its separate areas across the layers become major milestones within the narrative. They may be distinctly separate from the rest of the Abyss, operating by their own rules, or serve as primary and more defined examples of what Abyss's metaphysics are. A few of those notions to showcase in detail the specifics of those respective metaphysics can be also found in Blame, as ever-present and in some aspects amplified form, which, depending on the perspective, can be viewed both as alien or native to the environment. They are categorized only when the sum total of those phenomena is observed and evaluated, contributing to the sense of a system within the genre of speculative fiction. In particular, there are a few standout cases. The village at the sixth layer of the Abyss is immune to Curse of the Abyss. Its complex nature emergent from a blessing and artifacts further contributes to its unique compound nature. This compound origin may be comparable to the unique nature of Darkfire and proposed nature of the Swarm. Toa Heavy Industries operates on its own terms in relation to the net sphere to the point of being able to transcend the presence of the megastructure and, presumably, time itself. Moreover, presence of Toa Heavy Industries transcends fictional setting of Blame. On the notions of origins, the origins of Blame, megastructure can be partially reassembled across distant locations, so the Abyss is unique in its creation, and has remained as such for thousands of years, with consideration of the Golden City art. The complexity of the metaphysics, on a smaller scale, as the village, and on a larger scale, as the Abyss, present a space and potential for extensive metaphysics to be guessed. The same pattern is applicable to Cradle through its own uniqueness. The Firestorm Citadel, followed by Darkfire Firestorm Citadel, while was positioned as an anomaly of depths rotation, it is a fortress with the greatest concentration of curse, which might surpass any other location contained within Cradle. If there is no statement on the origin of Darkfire Firestorm Citadel, its origins, and currently its canon, are a ground for speculation and discussion of settings metaphysics. Deal front of the Abyss, while is of ancient origin, it is utilized as the Bondrood's headquarters and primary research facility, interfacing with the Curse of the Abyss. The facility can be comparable to Gremlins' repurposed utilization of fallen kingdoms, their palaces in particular, to house consoles, while preserving their symbolic role of seat of authority as Edo Front remains operational as an ancient elevator. Environments of the core are on their own unique, while presenting an instance of its manifestation outside of the core through subtle similarities of Gremlins' designs to ones within the core. At the Unknown Passage, the swarm ties with core's rectangular designs its electricity, while the core integrates artificial appearance of cubical whitespace with minerals, as now essential keys to traverse it, rather than optional elements meant to tap into the gate construction processes of clockwork. Then there are greater implications which are seemingly concealed by the corresponding locations, hinting and elaborating on the actual nature and scope of the setting. The time dilation of the Abyss birthday death disease, the certain units stationed to Abyss's layers, many architectural strata which reflect the deep understanding of the Abyss from the past, such being the joint delving site and the entirety of Edo Front. Advanced nature of safeguards of blame, as in their extremes and merger, capable of creating unique configurations of life, natural enough to potentially possess a terminal gene. Unique nature of the force field of the Abyss, excessive energy across Cradle, and energy reserves of safeguards large enough to power graviton beam emitter. Cyclopean infrastructure of the core terminal, and intricate designs of the console. The mundanity and near celestial origin of mutated on Cradle E-Class battle sprites. All those notions expand and deepen their respective settings. As we acknowledge the perspectives those settings are discovered through, we should note on a more subtle notion of supernatural pull into the Abyss. A subtle notion follows. Rico is being drawn back into the Abyss due to her nature tied to the Abyss, and the fated arrival of Isorans to Cradle as it is framed by the Echo Stones. Both cases reframe the protagonist's journey as tied to those locations on a supernatural or a spiritual level. To an extent, the present purpose of Killy as a safeguard with an alliance with the Authority and search for terminal gene positions him on a still grand, albeit timeless quest of restoring the natural order within the megastructure, which by its possibility of success threatens megastructure's present state and balance of power. Those are the notions which highlight katabatic narrative. With this we can now formulate a final conclusion on the essentials of Spiral Knight setting. This is the set of rules which can connect aforementioned themes in a set of aesthetically unique configuration. 1. The setting is a finite structure which contains and coexists with natural environment. 2. Environments represent unrestricted variety of the setting, while the enclosure sets order around them. 3. Player's perspective is one of an outsider exploring this setting to its origin point, while framing it as cosmically unique. An archetypal perspective of a hero's descent narrative introduces a world whose existence is rooted in the speculative fiction, futurism, alchemy, magic, and occult, where each of those components is aware of the others while they are operating together both in the present moment and across the timeline. As a result, they create a sense of history. Those components, once they are recognized, are placed onto spectrums, such as morality, mundanity, and externaturality, fantastic and realistic. It creates contrasts to them as they are explored. Cradle and Clockworks are characterized by a synergy of multiple environments, places, or symbols with archetypical images at their foundations with feel, mood, and quality representative of different themes within an encompassing system wherein each of those elements acknowledges and is acknowledged by other elements of the system. This feedback allows them not only to coexist, but to influence each other and invoke the aforementioned sense of synergy emerging from spatial, temporal, and causal interconnectedness, both into the past, as myths, and into the present and future, as modern retellings of those myths. This triad and the wiring, the bidirectional relations between those essentials, are then rendered from an abstract theory into reality in this concrete instance of a setting. The setting is made real in the literal, aesthetical, and metaphysical state of Cradle. and its factions present inside and outside of Cradle, but locked in on its reclamation, with accompanied conflicts and found through his own point of view. The exact way and method this schematic, being a set of restrictions and a harness, makes real an emergent set of abstract concepts is found in the specifics and broad relations we have discussed above. Through this approach, the setting becomes systemically explicable and symbolically resonant artifact of embedded theme. And when it is dissected, archetypal currents reveal themselves, finally allowing for an aesthetical system to be instinctually acknowledged.